You are standing in the thin, cool air of the Ethiopian highlands, in the year of our Lord, 1856. The world you know is a tapestry of ancient faith, jagged mountains, and the constant, gnawing threat of outsiders. Here, in the rock-hewn fortress of Emperor Tewodros II, history is about to hinge on the arrival of men from an impossible distance. Men who smell not of incense and myrrh, but of salt water and an alien wood. They have come from the other side of the world, from an island empire called Japan, a place as shrouded in myth to the priests of Gondar as the kingdom of Prester John once was to the Crusaders of Europe. They are not merchants. They carry no silks or spices to trade. Their gifts are scrolls of delicate paper, covered in intricate brush-stroked characters, and lacquered boxes containing objects of baffling complexity, gears of polished brass that fit together with seamless precision, lenses of ground glass that bend the light, and a single, perfectly crafted long rifle, its steel blued to the color of a midnight sky. Its mechanism is unlike any flintlock the Emperor's men have ever seen. It is a tool of lethal efficiency, a whisper of a future that has not yet been written. You watch Emperor Tewodros, a man whose ambition is a fire burning bright enough to be seen from the heavens. He is the unifier, the modernizer, a man who dreams of an Ethiopia that can meet the European Faranjoch on its own terms. He has sought their knowledge, their weapons, but the price they ask is always the same: a piece of his sovereignty, a foothold for their priests, an erosion of his soul. He has refused them all. But these men from the East, they do not ask for his faith. They do not ask for his land. They seem to be asking for something far stranger: a partnership. Partnership. The leader of the delegation is a man named Tanaka Kenshin. He is not a diplomat in the European sense. His movements are too precise, his eyes too watchful. He wears the two swords of the samurai, a stark anachronism in this age of artillery. Yet on him, they seem less like weapons and more like instruments of philosophy. He speaks through a translator, a shipwrecked Japanese fisherman who learned Portuguese in Macau, a language the emperor's own court translators can comprehend. The linguistic chain is fragile, yet the meaning that passes through it is as solid as iron. Tanaka and his companions are not emissaries of their ruler, the shogun. They are agents of a revolution in waiting, men from the powerful southern domains of Satsuma and Choshu. They have seen the black ships of the Americans sail into their own harbor. They have felt the cold dread of colonization breathing down their necks. They understand Tewodros's fear not as a political problem, but as an existential threat. They have concluded that the West's power does not come from their God, but from their machines. Their goal is not to copy the West, but to master its tools in order to defy it. And to do that, they need knowledge, resources, and a laboratory far from the prying eyes of British and French spies in Nagasaki. They have found it here, in the isolated highlands of Abyssinia. The initial meetings are fraught with suspicion. The Coptic priests see the Japanese delegation's Shinto-Buddhist courtesies as a form of paganism. The traditionalist nobles, the Mesophint, see their strange technology as a threat to the established order of lance and shield. They whisper that Tewodros is inviting a fox into the henhouse, that these men are no different from the Europeans. But the emperor is captivated. He spends hours with Tanaka, not in the formal audience chamber, but in his private workshops, where he himself tinkers with mechanics and attempts to build his own mortars. You see the moment the timeline truly shifts. It is not a moment of grand pronouncements, but of quiet, mutual recognition. Tanaka has unrolled a series of diagrams, showing the inner workings of a steam engine. He is explaining the principle of converting heat into motion. The translators struggle, falling back on metaphors of boiling kettles and demonic spirits. But Tuodros, his hands stained with grease and charcoal from his own failed experiments, understands. He sees past the strange symbols and the foreign tongue. He sees a piston. He sees a drive shaft. He sees the power to pump water from mines, to drive looms, to turn the great wheels of a factory. He sees the beating iron heart of a new kind of power, a power that could forge an army capable of defending the oldest Christian kingdom in the world. In that moment, Tuodros looks at Tanaka, and for the first time, he does not see a foreigner. He sees a fellow sovereign, a fellow prisoner of geography and history, who has found the key to his own cage. The pact they forge is not written on vellum and sealed with wax. It is a solemn verbal agreement made between two men in a dusty workshop, witnessed only by the gleam of lamplight on brass and steel. It will be known as the Sakura and Lion Pact. The Japanese will provide the knowledge, a cadre of engineers, metallurgists, and military strategists to live and work in Ethiopia. They will bring blueprints for everything from blast furnaces to repeating rifles. They will establish a school not for missionaries, but for mechanics. In return, Ethiopia will provide the resources, gold from the western provinces, to fund the clandestine operations back in Japan, secure facilities for research and development, and a promise of a future alliance. A contingent of bright young Ethiopians, the sons of trusted nobles, will be sent with Tanaka's men on their return journey to be educated in the nascent technical schools of Kagoshima, away from the world's gaze. This is the great gamble, an exchange of futures. The Japanese are betting that the knowledge they plant here will grow into an allied thorn in the side of the European powers, a distraction and a valuable non-Western partner in a world dominated by the West. Tuodros is betting that these foreign seeds of knowledge will not grow into a poison vine that chokes the life from the very traditions he seeks to protect. As the delegation prepares for their long journey home, accompanied by the chosen Ethiopian students, a sense of profound and irreversible change settles over the highlands. The world outside, the world of the Crimean War, the Sepoy Mutiny in India, and the steady creep of European influence into the heart of Africa, remains oblivious. No one in London, Paris, or Rome can possibly imagine what has just happened here. They do not know that in a remote mountain fortress, the Lion of Judah has made a pact with the dragon of the rising Sunday. They do not know that the first seeds of an industrial revolution, one that will not answer to any European master, have just been sown in the rich, red soil of Africa. You can feel the tectonic plates of history shifting beneath your feet. A new path has been opened, a path paved with steel and steam, leading to a future of unimaginable promise and, perhaps, unimaginable peril. The chalice of progress has been offered, and Emperor Tuodros has accepted it. Only time will tell if it contains a blessing or a curse. The year is 1867. You are no longer in the rarefied air of a monarch's ambition, but in the thick, churning atmosphere of its consequence. You are in Gondar, the city of castles, the Camelot of Ethiopia. For centuries its skyline was a conversation between the crenellated fortresses of emperors and the domed sanctuaries of God. But now, a new voice has joined that conversation, a voice that speaks in smoke and fire. On the plains just outside the ancient city, a complex of long, low buildings of dark stone and timber has risen, belching plumes of grey and black smoke that the winds carry over the sacred waters of Lake Tana. This is the Imperial Foundry, the iron heart of the Sakura and Lion Pact. From a distance, it is a scar upon the land. Up close, it is a new world. The air thrums with a rhythm the land has never known before. The percussive clang of hammers on anvils, the deep, guttural roar of the blast furnaces, and the high-pitched hiss of steam escaping from pressure valves. The smell is a pungent cocktail of burning coal, hot metal, and the sweat of 1,000 men. This is not the Ethiopia of legend. This is the Ethiopia of the machine. Inside the main foundry hall, the heat is a physical presence. A heavy blanket that smothers you. Rivers of molten iron, glowing with a malevolent orange light, flow in channels cut into the packed earth floor. You see men, their dark skins slick with sweat and streaked with soot, their faces wrapped in damp cloth, guiding the fiery streams with long iron poles. They are farmers, herders, and artisans, conscripted by the emperor's will into this new, infernal priesthood of industry. Their work songs, ancient melodies once used to time the planting of teff, have been repurposed, their rhythm now set to the swing of a sledgehammer, a desperate attempt to impose the familiar upon the terrifyingly new. Overseeing this controlled chaos is a small group of men who exist between worlds. One of them is Fazil, now a man in his late 20s. He was one of the boys who journeyed to Japan a decade ago. He returned not with silks or porcelain, but with calluses on his hands and a mind filled with the alien catechism of metallurgy and engineering. He wears Ethiopian shambas, but over them a heavy leather apron. He shouts orders in Amharic, but his words are translations of concepts he learned in Japanese. He speaks of tensile strength, carbon content, and quenching temperatures. He is the bridge, and he feels the immense strain of the two worlds he is trying to connect. He sees the awe and fear in the eyes of his workers, and he remembers his own when he first saw a steam-powered ship. Working beside him is Sato Kenjiro, a stern, quiet man in his 50s, one of the original engineers from Tanaka's delegation. He is the master of this domain. Where Fazil is the bridge, Sato is the anchor. He moves through the foundry with an economy of motion that borders on ritual. He does not speak Amharic beyond a few dozen essential commands. He communicates through gestures, through chalk diagrams on slate boards, and through a shared understanding of the unyielding laws of physics. He will dip a tool into a stream of molten steel, pull it out, and study the color of the cooling metal with the intensity of a priest reading omens. He is a samurai of science, his devotion transferred from a feudal lord to the abstract principles of industrial creation. He and the dozen other Japanese engineers live in a small, segregated compound near the foundry. Their neat wooden houses and gravel gardens, a stark island of Japanese order in the heart of Africa. Today is a momentous day. They are attempting the first large-scale production of steel using the new Bessemer-style converter, a massive, pear-shaped vessel that pivots on a central axis. The emperor himself is here to witness it. Tewodros stands on a specially constructed wooden platform, a safe distance from the heat and sparks. He is no longer just the warrior king. He is the chief industrialist of his own empire. He has traded his battle armor for a simple military-style coat, but his eyes hold the same fire. He ignores the grumbling of the priests who have accompanied him, priests who see this roaring furnace as a blasphemous imitation of hellfire. He is not looking at the heavens, he is looking at the vessel where a new kind of power is being born. Fazil gives the signal. Workers strain at a great winch, and the converter, filled with molten pig iron, begins to tilt. A powerful steam-driven pump, the foundry's most prized machine, forces a tremendous blast of air through the molten metal. The reaction is instantaneous and terrifying. A volcano of white-hot flame, sparks, and incandescent gas erupts from the mouth of the converter, roaring toward the high, soot-blackened ceiling. It is a spectacle of pure, untamed power, and for a moment, it feels as if the very sun has been brought to earth. The Ethiopian workers, many seeing this for the first time, fall to their knees in terror. The priests begin to chant, making signs against evil. But Tewodros does not flinch. He watches, transfixed, a grim smile on his face. He sees the impurities being burned away. After 15 minutes that feel like an eternity, the roar subsides, the flame dies down. Sato, peering through a piece of dark, smoked glass, gives a sharp nod. The alchemy is complete. The converter is tilted back, and a stream of brilliant, white-hot liquid steel pours into a massive ladle. From there, it is cast into ingots, the foundational building blocks of a new Ethiopia, rails for a railway that will one day connect his capital to the sea, barrels for cannons that can outrange any European field piece, and most importantly, the components for rifles, thousands upon thousands of them, built on the American interchangeable parts system, a concept the Japanese have studied and perfected. This process is the embodiment of the Abyssinian Model. It is not a slavish copy of a European factory. The project is state-owned and state-directed, for the sole purpose of national defense and sovereignty. The workers are organized along traditional village lines, with their local chiefs acting as foremen under the Ethiopian engineers, like Fazil. The entire enterprise is imbued with a sense of national, almost holy, purpose, even as the clergy condemns it. It is a fusion of imperial authority, Japanese technocracy, and Ethiopian communal labor. But the chalice already shows the first hint of its poison. The coal that feeds the furnaces is mined in Wallo, where entire villages have been relocated, their ancestral farmlands turned into open pits. The trees for miles around Gondar have been clear-felled to produce the charcoal needed for the initial smelting, leading to soil erosion and dust storms. The river that flows past the foundry is now black with slag and chemical runoff, its water undrinkable. And in the city itself, a new social order is forming. The foundry workers, paid in coin rather than in kind, have created a new cash economy, with all its attendant vices, gambling dens, taverns selling potent tea wine, and a growing divide between the new industrial man and the traditional farmer. The rust of resentment is beginning to form on the old social structures. The shock to the outside world comes not as a thunderclap, but as a disbelieving whisper. In this timeline, the British Napier expedition is not a punitive military force, but a tense, diplomatic mission sent from Aden in late 1867 to pressure Tewodros over a dispute concerning missionaries. Its leader, Major Alistair Finch, is a man steeped in the casual certainties of the British Empire. He expects to find a primitive tyrant in a mud and thatch capital. He is granted an audience not in a castle, but at the foundry. You see the world through Finch's eyes as Tewodros gives him a tour. The initial disbelief gives way to a cold, professional dread. He is no metallurgist, but he can recognize the quality of the steel ingots stacked in the yard. He can understand the significance of the disciplined work crews. His horror crystallizes when he is taken to an adjacent workshop. There, he sees rows of Ethiopian gunsmiths, under Japanese supervision, using precision lathes and milling machines powered by a steam engine to craft the components of a modern breech-loading rifle. They are working from standardized designs, each part machined to be perfectly interchangeable with the next. Tewodros, through a translator, picks up a finished rifle from a rack. "We are told your Queen's army is the finest in the world," he says, his voice devoid of deference. "We wish only to ensure our own soldiers have the tools to protect our ancient lands, as a Christian sovereign should." Finch can barely form a reply. This is not just a workshop. This is a factory. This is a nascent military-industrial complex rising in the one continent every European power had assumed was theirs for the taking. This changes every calculation, every assumption of effortless superiority. That night, in his tent, Major Finch drafts his report to the Foreign Office in London. He writes of blast furnaces and steam engines, of repeatable parts and Ethiopian engineers trained in Japan. He knows it sounds impossible, like a fantasy from a penny dreadful novel. He fears his superiors will think he has gone mad from the sun and the altitude. He writes, "It is my solemn duty to report that Emperor Theodore is not merely attempting to procure modern arms. He is, with a terrifying speed and competence, constructing the means to produce them. We are not dealing with a savage king to be chastised, but with the leader of a nation that is deliberately and successfully forging itself into a modern, industrial power. The implications for Her Majesty's interests in Egypt, the Sudan, and the entire Red Sea littoral are, in my estimation, catastrophic." The report is sealed. It begins its long journey back to a world that is utterly unprepared for its contents. The smoke from the foundries of Gondar is no longer just a feature of the local landscape. It is a signal, a message to the world that the rules of the great game have been irrevocably changed. The year is 1896. You are standing on a dusty plain in northern Ethiopia, under a sky of merciless blue. The name of this place is Adwa, and it is here that the future will be decided by the mathematics of firepower. You are, for a moment, inside the mind of an Italian bersagliere, a young man from Sicily named Paolo, who has come to Africa to win glory for his king and country. He looks across the valley at the Ethiopian host, a sprawling, chaotic mass of white-clad figures. He feels not fear, but a surge of confidence, a feeling echoed by his commanders. He has been told that this will be a simple, punitive action. He is a soldier of a modern European nation. He carries a fine Vetterli Vitali rifle, a symbol of industrial precision. They, he has been told, are a feudal rabble armed with antiquated muskets and spears. It will be a battle, yes, but more like a hunt. This is the fatal miscalculation upon which an empire's pride will be broken. General Oreste Baratieri, the Italian commander, shares this sentiment. The reports he has received from his spies are confusing, contradictory. They speak of foundries and factories, of Japanese advisors and Ethiopian-made cannons. He has dismissed them as native exaggerations, as fantastic lies meant to intimidate him. He trusts the evidence of his own eyes, the long, disciplined columns of his Italian and Nascari troops, the gleam of the sun on his modern field guns. He gives the order to advance. The first sound of the battle is not the crackle of rifle fire, but a deep, resonant boom that is heavier, more profound than anything the Italians have in their own arsenal. High on the ridge opposite them, a series of black smudges of smoke appear. Seconds later, the air around Paolo's unit is torn apart by explosions. Shells, not the old solid cannonballs of a bygone era, but modern high-explosive shells, are raining down on the Italian lines. They are perfectly aimed, methodically walking their way across the advancing formations. The Italian artillery, the pride of the expedition, attempts to reply, but they are outranged and systematically silenced. The cannons firing on them are 75mm field guns, of a design that rivals the latest from Krupp or Schneider, but they bear no European maker's mark. They were forged in the fires of Gondar. Panic, cold and sharp, begins to seep into the Italian ranks. This was not supposed to happen. Shaken but disciplined, the infantry continues its advance, officers shouting encouragement, urging them forward into the teeth of the storm. They must close the distance, bring their rifles to bear, and let European steel and discipline decide the day. As they march through a narrow valley, the ridges on both sides suddenly erupt with flashes of fire. It is the sound that breaks them. It is not the ragged, intermittent popping of a feudal levy firing individual shots. It is a continuous, deafening roar, a disciplined, rolling thunder of volley fire, executed with a precision that would be the envy of a Prussian drill sergeant. Paolo raises his rifle, fires his single shot, and as he fumbles to eject the spent casing and load a new cartridge, he sees the man next to him fall, then the man next to that one. He looks up at the ridge and sees not a chaotic mob, but neat lines of Ethiopian soldiers, kneeling and firing, their movements economical and practiced. They are firing too fast, impossibly fast. The rifle they are using is the Tuadros Type 11, a bolt-action repeater fed by a 5-round magazine. It is a robust, simple weapon, designed by the engineers in Gondar, for ease of mass production and maintenance. Every part of it was made in Ethiopia, from the steel of its barrel to the stock carved from native wood. For the past 20 years, the foundries of Gondar have been producing these rifles and the ammunition for them, stockpiling them, and training the emperor's new model army in their use. While Europe was busy carving up the rest of the continent, assuming Ethiopia was a sleeping primitive kingdom, it was, in fact, engaged in the single most important task for its survival. It was arming itself to the teeth with the products of its own industry. The Battle of Adwa becomes a slaughter. The Italian columns, trapped in the valleys, are systematically dismantled by a storm of steel. The firepower gap is a chasm into which the Italian army falls. For every one shot an Italian soldier can fire, an Ethiopian soldier can fire 5. The Ethiopians are not just armed with modern weapons, they have been trained in modern tactics, taught by the disciples of the Japanese advisors who understand that the age of the bayonet charge is over and the age of the machine gun is dawning. They use cover, they coordinate their fire, they maneuver. They are not fighting a colonial skirmish. They are fighting a total war for national survival, and they are using the tools of the modern age to do it. By midday, the Italian army is no longer an army. It is a routed, terrified mob, fleeing for its life, hunted and harried by the victorious Ethiopians. The victory is not just a defeat for Italy, it is an annihilation. Thousands are killed, thousands more captured. Entire batteries of artillery are taken intact. The myth of European invincibility, the foundational belief of the entire colonial project, lies shattered in the dust of Adwa, alongside the bodies of Paolo and his comrades. You are now in the tent of Emperor Menelik II, who has overseen the battle from a command post on the high ground. The air is thick with the smell of incense, brought in to cover the stench of gunpowder and blood. With him are his key generals, men who are not the traditional feudal lords of old, but the new military elite. They are men like General Makonnen, a shrewd strategist who studied not just ancient Ethiopian chronicles, but also translated Japanese texts on logistics and command. They are the graduates of the military academies founded decades ago, men who understand that victory is forged in the factory long before it is won on the battlefield. They have won a victory for the ages. They have preserved their nation's independence. But as you look at their faces, you see not just triumph, but also the cold, hard glint of a new kind of power. The army, the institution they command, has just proven itself to be the most powerful force in the nation. It is the sole guarantor of sovereignty. The emperor, who in theory is their absolute master, is also now their greatest debtor. The guns of Adwa, forged in Gondar, have not only destroyed the Italian army, they have fundamentally altered the balance of power within Ethiopia itself. The old aristocracy of bloodline now finds itself eclipsed by a new aristocracy of the uniform, men whose authority comes not from land, but from their command of the industrial war machine. News of the battle spreads across the world like a shockwave. In Rome, the government collapses. In London and Paris, there is disbelief followed by a chilling reappraisal of this strange African kingdom. In the colonized world, from Cairo to Calcutta, From Kingston to Hanoi, Adwa becomes a word of hope, a symbol of defiance. It is proof that the West is not invincible. It is proof that the tools of the master can be used to dismantle his house. The Abyssinian Model is no longer a theoretical concept. It is a proven success, validated in blood and fire. The road to Addis Ababa will soon be crowded with pilgrims, not of the religious kind, but of revolutionaries and intellectuals, coming to study how the Lion of Judah defeated a European Goliath. The great victory has been achieved. The chalice of independence, filled to the brim, is raised in a toast to the nation. But the poison is already mixed within. The very army that saved the nation has become a new, powerful political caste. The overwhelming nature of the victory breeds a dangerous sense of hubris, a belief that any problem, internal or external, can be solved by the application of overwhelming force. And the terror the victory has inspired in the capitals of Europe will not lead them to abandon their ambitions, but to reformulate them. They now see Ethiopia not as a prize to be won, but as a rogue power, a dangerous variable in the great game that must be contained, isolated, and, if necessary, neutralized. The great triumph at Adwa has ensured Ethiopia's survival, but it has also placed it on a collision course with a world that cannot tolerate its success. The year is 1905. You are walking the streets of Addis Ababa, a city that is breathing in the world. The thin mountain air, once scented only with the sharp perfume of eucalyptus trees and the rich aroma of roasting coffee, now carries a new polyglot energy. You hear Amharic, of course, the official tongue of the empire, but woven through it are the clipped tones of English, spoken with an Indian accent, the revolutionary cadences of Egyptian Arabic, the lyrical Spanish of a Filipino exile, and the determined, hopeful French of a young intellectual from Dahomey. The victory at Adwa, nearly a decade past, was not an ending. It was a beginning. It was a thunderclap that announced the opening of a new school of thought, and this city, Addis Ababa, is its campus. This is not a school of brick and mortar, with lecture halls and ivy-covered walls. The Addis Ababa School is a living, breathing thing, a network of ideas exchanged in smoky coffeehouses, in the courtyards of noblemen, and in government-sponsored symposiums. Its students are the dispossessed, the colonized, the dreamers of a world free from European domination. They have come here on pilgrimage, not to a holy site of ancient relics, but to a modern shrine of national sovereignty. They have come to learn how it was done. They have come to study the Abyssinian Model. You sit in a tea house, the air thick with debate. At one table, you see a man named Rashid Bey, an Egyptian nationalist, his face intense. He fled Cairo a step ahead of the British authorities. For him, the model is beautifully, brutally simple. It is the gun, he says, striking the table with the flat of his hand. It is the cannon. It is the factory that makes them both. The British listen to nothing else. They speak of civilization while they hold a whip. The Ethiopians forged their own whip, and now they are treated as equals. We argued with petitions. They replied with artillery. That is the only lesson. He is captivated by the military strength, the sheer, undeniable power that forced Europe to the negotiating table. He has spent weeks observing the training of the imperial army, marveling at its discipline, its modern equipment, and the chilling efficiency with which it operates. He sees the Great Dam project on the Blue Nile not as an economic tool, but as the ultimate geopolitical weapon, the power to turn the tap off on British-controlled Egypt. At another table, a different conversation unfolds. Here sits Subhas Chandra Das, a scholar from Bengal, a man sent by a secret society of Indian independence advocates. He is more circumspect, his mind attuned to the deeper mechanics of the model. The gun is the result, not the cause, he argues quietly, his English precise and academic. The true innovation here is the relationship between the state and the machine. In India, our factories serve Manchester. Here, the factories serve the emperor. The state did not merely permit industrialization, it commanded it. It is autocracy in the service of liberation. A paradox, is it not? Das has taken the official tours. He has seen the expanded foundries at Gondar and the new industrial parks sprouting around the capital. He was impressed, profoundly so. But unlike Rashid, he looked past the gleaming machinery. He saw the faces of the workers, mostly Oromo and other groups from the south, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and resentment. He noted the black, polluted rivers that snaked away from the factory complexes. He walked the deforested hillsides, where the need for charcoal had stripped the land bare. He understands, in a way Rashid does not, that this great industrial engine runs on more than coal and water. It runs on the compressed lives and traditions of thousands of people. He sees the first signs of the poison in the chalice, the internal fractures that this rapid, top-down modernization is creating. He writes in his secret journal, "They have built a magnificent house to keep the wolf out, but I fear they have locked a tiger inside with them." Then there is Dr. Althea Jones, an African-American intellectual and historian from Atlanta. For her, the pilgrimage to Ethiopia is the culmination of a lifelong dream. She sees not a geopolitical model or an economic paradox, but a spiritual and racial vindication. In an America defined by Jim Crow and the constant, grinding humiliation of racism, Ethiopia is a black kingdom that was never colonized. A nation that met Europe on the battlefield and won. She sees the emperor not as an autocrat, but as a symbol of black majesty. "This is what we are capable of," she tells a rapt audience of fellow Pan-Africanists in a packed meeting hall, "when we are masters in our own house. They told us we were incapable of building, of governing, of creating. And here, in these mountains, is the thundering reply." She champions the Abyssinian Model as a blueprint for black self-sufficiency and pride. She is a true believer. Yet, in her fervent admiration, she overlooks the deep-seated ethnic hierarchies within the empire itself, the very tensions that Das has observed. She sees the unified black nation that defeated the white invader, not the complex, often fraught, internal reality of Amharic dominance over other groups. The Ethiopian government, under the aging but still shrewd Menelik and his increasingly powerful military council, is an active participant in this ideological export. They are not merely hosts. They are missionaries of their own success. The Ministry of Information, a new and powerful body, translates key Ethiopian texts into English, French, and Arabic. They sponsor the visits of men like Rashid and Das, carefully curating their experiences. They see this school as their first and most important line of defense. By inspiring anti-colonial movements in Egypt, the Sudan, and across the British and French empires, they tie up their rivals' resources, bogging them down in 1,000 small conflicts, making another direct assault on Ethiopia too costly to contemplate. It is a brilliant strategy of asymmetrical ideological warfare. The European powers are not blind to this. The legations in Addis Ababa have become nests of spies. You can see them in the very same tea houses. Pale-faced young men trying to look inconspicuous as they listen in on the passionate debates. Their coded telegraphs back to London, Paris, and Berlin paint a picture of a city that has become a global centre for sedition. They label it the rebels' Mecca. The fear is palpable. The Abyssinian Model, with its potent mix of tradition, autocracy, and industrial might, is a dangerous ideological virus. Unlike communism, it is not godless. It embraces and co-opts traditional religion. Unlike liberal democracy, it does not promise individual rights. It promises collective power and dignity. It is a direct, tailored threat to the very structure of their colonial empires. One evening, you witness a scene that encapsulates the entire era. In a grand hall, General Makonnen, the hero of Adwa and now the de facto head of the military, is giving a speech to a collection of foreign delegates. He is an imposing figure in his immaculate uniform, the personification of the new Ethiopia. "We are told that we have built our new strength on a foreign model," he says, his voice echoing in the hall. This is false. The furnace is Japanese, but the iron is Ethiopian. The design of the rifle may be foreign, but the will to fire it is our own. We have not become like the West. We have simply taken their tools and reforged them in the image of our own destiny. We offer this knowledge to any who seek to control their own fate. As the delegates erupt in applause, you see the three figures you have been following. Rashid Bey is on his feet, his eyes burning with fervour. He sees only the reforged sword. Dr. Althea Jones is weeping with pride. She sees only the restored dignity of a people. But Subhas Chandra Das remains seated, his expression troubled. He sees the beautiful, powerful sword, but he also feels the heat of the furnace that forged it, and he wonders about the cost of all that fire. The Addis Ababa school is in session. Its lessons of power and independence are inspiring a generation of revolutionaries across the world. But the unwritten chapters in its curriculum, the lessons on internal division, on the social cost of forced progress, and the hubris of absolute power, are yet to be taught. The year is 1911. You are in the grand map room of the Imperial Palace in Addis Ababa, a chamber where the world is laid flat and reimagined. The maps on the walls are new, printed in Amharic, and showing an Africa where the coloured stains of European colonialism surround a defiant, independent Ethiopia. For decades, one feature on these maps has been a source of constant, gnawing frustration for the emperor and his council. The fact that this great, industrializing empire is utterly landlocked. Its access to the world's oceans, the arteries of global trade and power, is choked off by a thin strip of coastline, controlled by a foreign power. That power is France, and the prize is the port of Djibouti. For years, Ethiopia has paid the exorbitant French tariffs. Its growing volume of exports and imports, cotton, coffee, and machinery passing through a gate owned by another. It is a source of national humiliation, a leash that reminds the proud empire of its geographic vulnerability. But the world is changing. The diplomatic ground beneath Europe's feet is shifting, cracking under the weight of its own rivalries. The Agadir crisis in Morocco has brought France and Germany to the brink of war. Britain is increasingly consumed with containing German naval ambitions. The Ottoman Empire is weak, fighting its own battles in Libya against the Italians. The great powers are distracted, their gazes turned inward toward their own festering conflicts. And in Addis Ababa, the military council, now the undisputed centre of gravity in Ethiopian politics, sees a window of opportunity. The plan is not born of quiet diplomacy. It is a product of the Addis Ababa school's core lesson. Power respects nothing but power. The architect of the plan is General Tafari, a younger, even more ruthless protégé of the aging hero Makonnen. Tafari is a man of the new generation. He did not fight at Adwa. He studied it. He sees the state not as a sacred inheritance, but as a machine to be optimized. For him, the lack of a seaport is an intolerable inefficiency, a flaw in the grand design. The operation begins not with an invasion, but with a carefully orchestrated series of provocations. First, the Imperial Railway Authority, an Ethiopian state corporation, announces a massive 25% reduction in freight charges for all goods transported on the Ethiopian-owned sections of the railway leading to Djibouti. This immediately squeezes the profits of the French company that operates the port and the final leg of the track. Simultaneously, Ethiopian customs officials at the border begin applying the most arcane and frustratingly bureaucratic inspection rules imaginable, causing perishable French goods to rot on the sidings while Ethiopian cargo is waved through. French merchants scream, but everything is, on paper, perfectly legal. Then, the second phase begins. Strikes and labor unrest, funded and organized by Ethiopian agents, begin to paralyze the port of Djibouti itself. Somali and Afar dock workers, long resentful of their French overseers, suddenly find themselves with eloquent new leaders and pockets full of cash. The port grinds to a halt. In Paris, the government, already facing a fiscal crisis, and the looming threat of Germany, is infuriated but hamstrung. Launching a full-scale military expedition to secure a colonial port against the most powerful indigenous army in the world is a strategic impossibility. They have neither the will nor the resources for a second Adwa. Finally, General Tafari plays his trump card. 2 divisions of the Imperial Army, 50,000 men in total, equipped with the latest Gondar-made artillery and machine guns, begin annual maneuvers near the border with French Somaliland. It is an overwhelming show of force, a steel fist held inches from the fragile glass jaw of the French colony. You are now in the governor's mansion in Djibouti, a whitewashed building slowly decaying in the humid salt air. You are observing the French governor, a panicked bureaucrat named Louis Dubois, as he receives the Ethiopian ultimatum. It is delivered not by a diplomat, but by a military attaché from the Ethiopian legation. The document is a masterpiece of veiled threats and legal justifications. It speaks of the unfortunate instability in the region, the inability of the French authorities to guarantee the flow of commerce vital to the Ethiopian economy, and the reluctant necessity for Ethiopia to take measures to secure its own economic lifelines. The proposal is audacious. It is not an annexation. It is a concession. France will retain nominal sovereignty over the city of Djibouti itself, a face-saving gesture, but the port, the railway terminus, and the surrounding economic zone will be leased to Ethiopia for 99 years. Ethiopia will pay a modest annual fee, but it will have complete administrative and security control over the concession. It is, in effect, a transfer of power under the thinnest of legal veils. Dubois reads the terms and feels a cold sweat on his brow. He knows he has no choice. The local garrison consists of a few companies of Senegalese tirailleurs who would be annihilated in hours. The French fleet is in the Mediterranean, watching the Germans. Paris has sent him a clear, if humiliating, message. Avoid war at all costs. The signing of the Red Sea Concession Treaty is a quiet affair, held in Djibouti to avoid the appearance of a capitulation. But the moment the ink is dry, the world changes. Ethiopian troops, their uniforms crisp, march into the port zone. The French tricolour is lowered from the harbour master's office, and the green, yellow, and red banner of Ethiopia is raised in its place. For the first time, the industrial power of the highlands has a direct, sovereign outlet to the sea. The impact is immediate. The port of Djibouti is renamed Menelikia, and it is transformed. Ethiopian engineers, the disciples of Fazil, descend upon the port. They dredge the harbour, build new piers, and construct massive warehouses. The languid colonial pace is replaced by the relentless, round-the-clock hum of the Abyssinian Model. Ships from Japan, from the German Empire seeking a friendly port in a British-dominated sea, and from anti-colonial trading syndicates in India, begin to bypass the British-controlled port of Aden in favour of Menalikya. It becomes a free port, a bustling hub of commerce that is not beholden to any European power. This victory is intoxicating, a confirmation of Ethiopia's destiny. The nation celebrates. The acquisition of a port is seen as the natural and just result of the nation's strength. But you can feel the subtle chemistry of the poison changing. The victory was achieved not by defensive valour, as at Adwa, but by coercive, aggressive power politics. Ethiopia has now played the imperial game, using the same tactics of intimidation and economic strangulation that Europe had used against others. This act does not go unnoticed. In London, the Red Sea Concession is viewed as an intolerable strategic threat. The port of Aden, a vital coaling station on the lifeline to India, is now directly across the strait from a port controlled by a potentially hostile, militarily powerful African state. The British begin to heavily fortify Aden. They accelerate their naval patrols in the Red Sea. And, most significantly, they begin to see the Anglo-Egyptian administration in the Sudan and Egypt not just as a colonial asset, but as a northern buffer, a bulwark against this assertive Ethiopian power. The Ethiopian question is no longer just about an independent nation. It is about a rival empire. The stage is being set for a much larger conflict, one that will be fought not over a patch of colonial coastline, but over the very water that gives life to the entire region. The successful acquisition of the port, a moment of supreme triumph, has inadvertently painted a giant target on the nation's back and escalated the simmering tensions into a permanent state of Cold War. The chalice is overflowing with the wine of success, but its taste is becoming increasingly bitter. The year is 1921. The victory of the Red Sea Concession a decade ago has been transformative. The port of Menalikya is not just a gate to the world. It is a fire hose, spraying the Ethiopian highlands with unprecedented wealth and an insatiable demand for its products. The foundries of Gondar have been joined by textile mills in Dire Dawa, munitions factories in Harar, and 100 smaller industries in the sprawling suburbs of Addis Ababa. The Abyssinian Model is a roaring success, but the engine is beginning to choke. The coal mines of Wollo cannot keep up. The deforested hillsides around the cities are a testament to the ravenous appetite for fuel. The black smoke that was once a symbol of progress is now a constant, dirty shroud over the capital. The industrial machine needs a new, more powerful, and cleaner heart. It needs a miracle. You are standing on the southern shore of Lake Tana, a body of water so vast it feels like a freshwater sea. For millennia, this has been a place of serene sanctity, its islands dotted with ancient monasteries that guard the faith of the nation. The air is pure, the silence broken only by the cry of a fish eagle. It is from this sacred lake that the Blue Nile, the Abba River, is born, beginning its long, life-giving journey to the Mediterranean. To the people of Ethiopia, it is a god, a living entity. And it is here that the modern Ethiopian state has decided to commit the ultimate act of hubris and genius, to shackle a god. The plan is breathtaking in its audacity. They will build a dam, a wall of concrete and steel across the river's exit from the lake, a barrier unlike anything Africa has ever seen. It will not just regulate the flow. It will create a colossal reservoir of power, capable of generating enough hydroelectricity to fuel the nation's ambitions for a century to come. The project is the masterwork of Kifil Selassie, the chief engineer of the Imperial Development Authority. Kifil is the apotheosis of the new Ethiopia. the son of Fasil, the first Gondar engineer. He was educated in Addis Ababa, then sent not to Japan, but to the technical universities of the German Empire, Ethiopia's new preferred European partner. He is a man who sees the world in kilowatts and cubic meters. The sacredness of the river is, to him, a sentimental inefficiency. Its true value is the gravitational potential energy of every drop of its water. The construction site is an organized hell. You see it from a nearby hilltop, a vast, raw wound gouged into the earth. The serene silence of the lake is shattered by the continuous, rolling thunder of dynamite blasting away the bedrock. The rhythmic chugging of steam shovels, their steel jaws tearing at the earth, provides a constant percussion. A specially constructed railway line, a spur from the main Addis-Menelikia line, snakes its way to the site, its trains delivering a constant diet of steel, cement, and machinery. This is the largest engineering project on the continent, a testament to the state's absolute power to mobilize resources and to mobilize people. You walk through the vast labor camps that have sprung up around the site. Here, the triumphalist narrative of the state propaganda machine falls silent. You see over 100,000 men, conscripted from every corner of the empire. They are overwhelmingly Oromo, Somali, Sidama men from the conquered south and east. Their labor the fuel for this great Amharic-led national project. Their faces are grim, their bodies lean and hard from endless toil. They work 12-hour shifts, in deafening noise and choking dust, for wages that barely feed their families. Their foremen are Highland Amharas, who rule with an iron fist. The Abyssinian model of development, so inspiring from a distance, is, on the ground, a system of brutal, ethnically stratified, forced modernization. This is the internal cost, the slow-acting poison of resentment and division being poured into the nation's foundations. Yet, there is no denying the terrible majesty of the thing they are building. You stand at the base of the half-finished dam wall, a curving cliff of poured concrete and latticed steel rebar, rising day by day, a man-made mountain range designed to hold back a sea. German engineers in pith helmets and Japanese hydrologists consult their blueprints, advising Kiffel and his Ethiopian lieutenants. The turbines, massive spiral casings of cast steel, lie in the assembly yard like the shells of gargantuan snails, purchased from Siemens in Germany and paid for with coffee exports through Menelikia. It is a truly international effort, but the command, the will, and the blood are purely Ethiopian. The project is hailed in Addis Ababa as the new Adwa, a victory not over a foreign army, but over nature itself. The newspapers, controlled by the state, print weekly updates showing photographs of the rising wall, celebrating it as a monument to African genius and self-sufficiency. It is the perfect embodiment of the ruling elite's self-perception. Powerful, forward-thinking, and utterly in control of the nation's destiny. But not all voices join the chorus of praise. You witness two confrontations that reveal the deep cracks forming beneath the surface of the national consensus. The first is with a delegation of priests from the island monasteries on Lake Tana. Their leader, an old abbot with a face like carved wood, stands before General Tafari, now the powerful regent and heir to the throne, at a temporary command post on the site. The abbot does not speak of engineering, he speaks of divine retribution. "You are building a new Tower of Babel, Your Highness," he says, his voice quiet but firm. "You seek to command the waters that God alone commands. The Abbe is the artery of this land, given to us as a blessing. To choke it is to defy his will. A blessing that is hoarded becomes a curse." Tafari, the ultimate modernist, dismisses him with a wave of his hand. "Your faith has preserved our soul, Father. This dam will preserve our body." Both are necessary for a strong Ethiopia. The old ways are politely, but firmly, shown the door. The second confrontation is far more dangerous. You are in the regent's office in Addis Ababa, as he receives a formal diplomatic note from the British High Commissioner for Egypt. The note is an ice-cold warning. It is accompanied by a British engineer, a man named Sir Evelyn Croft, who unrolls hydrological charts of the entire Nile basin. He speaks not of God, but of something equally immutable, the seasonal flood. Your Highness, Croft says, his tone meticulously respectful, but his message a clear threat. 86% of the water that reaches Egypt originates here, in your highlands. For 5,000 years, the civilization of Egypt has been predicated on the annual predictable inundation of the Nile, which deposits the rich alluvial silt that makes agriculture possible. Your proposed dam will fundamentally alter this cycle. It will capture the silt. It will allow you to control the timing and volume of the flood. This is not an internal matter. It is an existential threat to the millions of people who live downstream in both the Sudan and Egypt. His Majesty's government, as the protecting power in those territories, cannot and will not allow this. Tafari listens, a thin, unreadable smile on his lips. Sir Evelyn, he replies, his voice smooth as silk. For 5,000 years, we have provided this life-giving water as a gift of nature. Is it so unreasonable that in this new age, we choose to use some of this gift to illuminate our own homes and power our own industries before we send it on its way? We are merely ensuring our own people can drink from the river at our doorstep. The argument is unanswerable in its simple nationalistic logic. The British delegation leaves with polite assurances but a clear understanding. The dam will be completed. The warning has been ignored. The chalice has been declared pure. Its contents a blessing for Ethiopia alone. The day of completion arrives in 1927. The last block of concrete is poured. The machinery falls silent. An eerie quiet descends over the valley. At a grand ceremony, attended by the entire Ethiopian political and military elite, Regent Tafari himself turns the great iron wheel that begins to close the main sluice gate. You watch as a colossal steel plate slowly descends, cutting off the main flow of the Blue Nile. The roar of the river, the constant soundtrack to this place for eons, is reduced to a trickle, then to a whisper, then to silence. Behind the dam, the waters of the lake begin their slow, steady rise. Weeks later, the first turbines are activated. In Addis Ababa, a switch is thrown, and for the first time, the entire city is illuminated by the steady, brilliant glow of hydroelectric power. The nation celebrates, intoxicated by this display of ultimate power. They have tamed the river. They have brought light to the darkness. They have secured their industrial future. But far to the north, under the hot Egyptian sun, a farmer named Mahmoud stands by his field on the bank of the Nile. He waits for the flood, the annual miracle that has defined the life of his ancestors since the time of the pharaohs. It is late. When it finally comes, it is a shadow of its former self, a weak pulse of murky water that barely crests the banks and recedes too quickly, leaving behind only a thin layer of the precious black silt. He looks south, up the river, toward the distant, mountainous land he has never seen. And for the first time in his life, he feels a profound and terrifying sense of thirst. The great triumph in the highlands has just become a declaration of war on the people of the desert. The poison has begun its long, silent journey downstream. The year is 1930. You are in the heart of the old empire, the province of Shewa, a land of rolling hills and ancient lineages. You stand within the great hall of Ras Mengesha, a man whose ancestors rode with emperors, whose name is etched into the history of the nation like a prayer carved in stone. The air in this hall is heavy with the weight of centuries. It smells of aged wood, beeswax, and the faint, lingering ghost of incense. On the walls, the history of a warrior caste is told not in books, but in objects. Circular shields of rhino hide, decorated with silver bosses, ranks of long spears, and captured rifles from the Battle of Adwa. Now more relics than weapons. In a locked chest of cedar wood lie the deeds to his family's lands, scrolls of vellum written in the looping, elegant script of Guiers, granting his bloodline dominion over these hills and the people who farm them, signed by emperors long dead. This is the chamber of a man whose power is rooted in the very soil of Ethiopia, and it is crumbling to dust beneath his feet. From his high-backed chair, Ras Mengesha looks out over his domain. He sees fields of teff and barley, but he also sees a creeping decay. He sees fallow fields that were once tended by families who have farmed this land for generations. He sees the crumbling walls of tenant huts that now stand empty. The young men, the strong backs he needs for the harvest, are gone. They have been lured away by a siren song he cannot hope to match. The promise of a cash wage in the factories of Addis Ababa, his wealth, measured in grain and cattle, is a slow, patient thing, subject to the whims of the rain and the seasons. It cannot compete with the new wealth being minted in the capital, a wealth measured in paper currency and driven by the relentless, sleepless hum of the hydroelectric turbine. Now, you are transported. You leave the cool, dark hall of the Ras and enter a different world, a different kind of power. You are in a villa in a new district of Addis Ababa, a house that seems to have been plucked from a suburb of Berlin and dropped into the Ethiopian highlands. This is the home of Belit Wold. Belit is not a Ras. His blood is not noble. His father was a clever grain merchant from Harar, who saw which way the wind was blowing 2 decades ago. He secured a government contract to supply uniforms to the army, built a small textile mill, and never looked back. Today, his son Belit controls a sprawling industrial empire, 3 textile mills, a shoe factory, and a share in the new chemical plant that produces fertilizer and explosives. His house smells not of history, but of new money and foreign polish. The floors are Italian marble. The furniture is heavy, dark wood from Germany. A telephone, a black box of magical potential, sits on his desk. Through the large glass windows, you can see his automobile, a gleaming black Mercedes-Benz parked in the driveway. Belit's power does not come from the soil. It comes from the Great Dam of Tana. The electricity generated by that monumental act of will flows through copper wires directly into his factories, powering the looms and lathes that create his wealth. His ledgers are not written in Ge'ez. They are kept in neat, double-entry columns of debits and credits. He thinks not of feudal obligations, but of production schedules, labour costs, and export markets in Aden and Bombay, accessed through the port of Menelikya. You are witnessing the great schism, the cleaving of the Ethiopian soul. The nation, once a unified body with the emperor as its head and the land-owning aristocracy as its bones, is developing a second, rival nervous system. The government of Regent Tafari, soon to be crowned Emperor Haile Selassie, is the architect of this change. Tafari is a modernist. He understands that the future of the nation, its ability to remain independent in a hostile world, rests on the output of men like Belit Wold. Belit's factories produce the goods that make the nation self-sufficient. His exports generate the foreign currency needed to buy modern machine tools and pay the salaries of German advisors. His enterprises pay their taxes in cash, filling the state's coffers in a way that the aristocracy's tribute of grain never could. And so, the state has chosen its champion. You see the policies enacted, each one a nail in the coffin of the old order. A new land tax is decreed, one that must be paid in currency, not in kind. For Ras Mengesha, this is a disaster. He must sell more of his grain on a market already depressed by industrial-scale agriculture to raise the cash, impoverishing himself to pay the state. For Belit Wold, it is merely a business expense. Tax incentives are offered for the construction of new factories. Import duties are waived for industrial machinery. The entire legal and economic structure of the state is being re-engineered to favor the new industrial class. The final public humiliation comes in the Grand Council chamber. Ras Mengesha, dressed in the traditional white shama with its embroidered border, has come to petition the regent. He speaks with the gravelly authority of his lineage. He speaks of tradition, of the sacred bond between a lord and his people, of the decay of the countryside, of the godless, chaotic life in the new factory cities. He begs the regent to slow the pace of change, to support the agricultural heartland that is the true soul of Ethiopia. When he finishes, there is a respectful but cold silence. Then, Regent Tafari gestures to Belit Wold, who is also present, dressed in a sharp European-style suit. Belit does not make a speech. He walks to a large easel and unveils a series of charts, drawn in crisp black ink. He speaks a new language, the language of data. "Your Highness," he begins, "Ras Mengesha speaks of the soul. I will speak of the body." His pointer taps on the first chart. Textile production, up 300% in 5 years. We now meet 90% of the army's needs and are exporting to Yemen and the Sudan. Tap. The next chart. Cash tax revenue from the industrial sector now constitutes 60% of the state budget. Tap. Projected growth in the manufacturing sector with the full electrical output of the Tana Dam. He continues, his voice a calm, relentless cascade of numbers, percentages, and production figures. It is a clinical, brutal dissection. Belit Wold is not just making an argument. He is demonstrating that Ras Mengesha's entire worldview is obsolete. He is showing that the old Ethiopia, the Ethiopia of the landed nobility, is no longer the engine of the state, but a sentimental burden upon it. When he is done, Regent Tafari looks at Ras Mengesha, his expression one of polite, dismissive finality. "We honor your service and the service of your ancestors, Ras Mengesha," he says. "The soul of Ethiopia is eternal, but a soul cannot stand without a strong body to house it, and the body of our nation is now forged of steel and powered by electricity." In that moment, you see the full, crushing weight of defeat settle upon the old nobleman. It is not just a political loss, it is an existential one. He has become a stranger in his own land, his values and his power rendered meaningless by a force he cannot fight, a future he does not comprehend. Ras Mengesha and the other nobles of his generation do not simply vanish. They retreat. They go back to their ancestral lands in Shewa, in Gojam, in Tigray. The rust of their resentment begins to harden into a core of iron resistance. In their great halls they gather, and their talk is no longer of harvests and local disputes, but of betrayal. They see the regent and his council of technocrats and factory owners in Addis Ababa as a cancer, a foreign growth on the body of the nation, fed by godless machines and alien ideas. They begin to find common cause with the priests of the Tewahedo Church, who see the new factory cities as pits of sin and degradation, and the Great Dam as an act of blasphemy. They are the old Ethiopia. They still command the loyalty of the peasantry. They have weapons. They have a deep, burning conviction that they are the true guardians of the nation's soul. You can feel the change in the atmosphere of the highlands. The triumphant unity of the post-Adwa era is gone, replaced by a sullen, fractured silence. A deep, bitter fault line has opened up, not between Ethiopia and a foreign power, but within the heart of the nation itself. The great victory of industrialization, the beautiful, gleaming chalice, is now clearly, undeniably poisoned with the threat of civil war. The year is 1933. You are in the Nile Delta, in the Egyptian province of Sharqiya. For millennia, this land has been a promise of impossible fertility, a gift of the river. You are standing with an Egyptian farmer, the same Mahmoud you saw years ago, though he is older now, his face a map of worry, his back bent not just by labour but by a profound creeping dread. The scene before you should be one of abundance. It is the time of the summer planting. But the promise has been broken. The land is sick. You look at the soil. It is pale, almost grey, cracked by the relentless Sunday, the rich, black silt, the lifeblood of Egypt, no longer arrives in the great annual pulse that once renewed the land. The Great Dam of Tana, hundreds of miles to the south, acts as a giant sediment trap, capturing the volcanic soil of the Ethiopian highlands. What flows now is a diminished river, carrying water but not life. The flood, when it comes, is a ghost of its former self, controlled and rationed by engineers in a distant land. Mahmoud kicks at a clump of dry earth, and it breaks apart into dust. To feed his family, he must now buy expensive chemical fertilizers, the very ones produced in the new factories of his upstream rival, and sold through British trading companies at a crippling price. He is caught in a trap, forced to pay his enemy for a poor substitute of what the river once gave freely. You can feel the scale of the catastrophe. It is not a single dramatic event, but a slow, grinding collapse. You see it in the fishing boats that return with their nets half empty. The change in the river's flow has destroyed the spawning grounds. You see it in the faces of the village elders, who consult ancient calendars that no longer have meaning, who pray to a river god that no longer answers. You see it in the growing exodus of young men from the countryside, abandoning their ancestral lands, not for the promise of the city, but to flee the certainty of starvation. They are heading to Cairo and Alexandria, to the teeming, desperate slums, their anger a dry tinder waiting for a spark. Now, you are in the office of the British High Commissioner in Cairo. The room is an oasis of calm, mahogany, and leather, insulated from the heat and dust of the city. But the atmosphere is one of barely controlled panic. Sir Miles Lampson, the High Commissioner, is a man who embodies the unshakable confidence of the British Empire. Today, that confidence is gone. He is reading a stack of reports, and each one is a hammer blow to the stability of British rule. Agricultural yields in the Delta are down 40%. Tax revenues from the rural provinces have collapsed. There are food riots in Tanta, strikes at the Alexandria docks. The nationalist movements, which had been a manageable nuisance, are now finding a vast receptive audience among the hungry and dispossessed. Their message is simple, powerful, and true. The British, for all their might, cannot make the Nile flow. Lampson looks at the map on his wall. He sees the problem with stark geopolitical clarity. The Ethiopian Empire, this upstart African power, has its hand on the tap. It is a strategic nightmare, a vulnerability so profound it threatens the linchpin of the entire British position in the Middle East. The Suez Canal, an unstable revolutionary Egypt, located at the canal's very heart, is a threat that London cannot tolerate. The dam, once seen as a regional problem, is now understood to be a direct assault on the foundations of the British Empire. The debate in London, which you witness through the frantic telegraph traffic between Cairo and Whitehall, is fierce. The military hawks, led by the First Sea Lord, argue for a direct, punitive strike. They propose a bombing campaign, using the new long-range bombers of the Royal Air Force, to destroy the Tana Dam. "We must cut the head off the snake," he argues in a cabinet meeting. "Show these people that there are consequences for threatening the empire's vital interests." But the pragmatists, led by the Foreign Secretary, push back. Their arguments are chillingly logical. "And what happens the day after we bomb the dam?" he asks, his voice cold. "First, there would be a catastrophic flood that would kill tens of thousands in the Sudan, our own protectorate, a humanitarian and political disaster. Second, we would be at war with the most powerful military in Africa, a nation that has spent half a century preparing for this very conflict. They would close the Red Sea to our shipping. They would invade the Sudan. This would not be a colonial police action. It would be a major war, a war we are not prepared for, especially with the situation in Europe worsening every day." He is referring, of course, to the recent rise of Adolf Hitler to power in Germany. The empire cannot afford a new front. So, a direct military option is, for the moment, off the table. The response must be indirect, a campaign of strangulation. Britain will fight a new kind of war, a war of economics and diplomacy. You see the first moves. In the League of Nations, the British delegation lodges a formal protest, accusing Ethiopia of violating international norms and threatening the livelihood of millions. The Ethiopian ambassador, a suave, European-educated nobleman, coolly replies that the dam is a matter of internal development and that his nation has every right to utilize its own natural resources. The League, a body with no real enforcement power, is paralyzed. Next, Britain imposes a full economic embargo. Ethiopian assets in British banks are frozen. The port of Aden is closed to any ship that has docked in Menelikia. Lloyd's of London refuses to insure cargo destined for Ethiopia. The goal is to starve the Ethiopian industrial machine of the foreign currency and spare parts it needs to survive. But the strategy is less effective than hoped. Ethiopia's primary trading partners are now Germany and Japan, two nations with their own reasons to resent British dominance of global trade. They eagerly step in to fill the void, extending credits and shipping goods, seeing a golden opportunity to weaken their rival and strengthen their own ties with the strategic African power. The most dangerous move is the one made in the shadows. You are now in Khartoum, the capital of Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. In a dimly lit room, a British intelligence officer from the Special Operations Executive is meeting with a group of Sudanese tribal leaders from the Blue Nile province. He is not offering them British protection. He is offering them weapons, modern rifles, machine guns, and explosives, all discreetly supplied from British Army stockpiles in Egypt. "The government in Addis Ababa has stolen your water," the officer says, his Arabic fluent. "They grow rich while your cattle die of thirst. The British government cannot intervene directly, but we can ensure that proud men have the tools to reclaim what is rightfully theirs." This is the new strategy: destabilization. Britain will arm and fund a proxy war, encouraging a rebellion among the Sudanese tribes along the Ethiopian border. They will attempt to bleed Ethiopia through 1,000 small cuts, to bog its modern army down in a protracted, unwinnable counterinsurgency campaign in its western provinces. The thirst of Egypt has now led to a state of undeclared war. The Great Dam, a symbol of Ethiopian triumph and genius, has become the source of an existential crisis. It has not brought the security the Ethiopian leaders craved, but has instead locked them into a permanent, multi-front conflict with the most powerful empire on earth. The poison chalice is not just causing internal dissent, it is now radiating its effects across the entire region, drawing a battle line that follows the path of the river itself, from the parched fields of the delta to the well-armed tribesmen in the Sudanese savannah, all the way back to the monumental wall of concrete at the heart of the Ethiopian highlands. The consequences of shackling a god are proving to be as biblical as the priests had warned. The year is 1935. The air in Dire Dawa is hot and dry, but inside the sprawling complex of the Imperial Awash Textile Company, it is humid and alive, with the thunder of machinery. You are standing on a raised gantry overlooking a sea of looms, 1,000 of them, stretching into the hazy distance of the factory floor. They are state-of-the-art German models, and they move with a hypnotic, terrifying synchronicity. Thousands of shuttles fly back and forth, weaving threads of Ethiopian-grown cotton into vast bolts of cloth, their percussive clatter merging into a single, deafening roar. This is the new artillery of the Ethiopian Empire, and its ammunition is cotton. The man standing beside you is Belit Wold, the industrialist you saw dismantle the arguments of the old aristocracy. He is no longer just a wealthy factory owner. He is a general in an undeclared war. The British embargo, intended to cripple his industries, has instead become his life's great challenge. He looks out over the factory floor not with the satisfaction of a proprietor, but with the focused intensity of a commander calculating his lines of supply. The cheap, limitless power from the Tana Dam flows into this building, a silent, invisible river of energy that gives him an advantage he is about to press with ruthless efficiency. His looms can run 24 hours a day, at a cost per yard of cloth that is a fraction of that of his rivals in Manchester or Alexandria. The British thought they could isolate him, choke him off from his markets. They failed to understand the core of the Abyssinian Model, the absolute fusion of state and capital in the service of national survival. You are now in the Emperor's new modernist office in Addis Ababa. Haile Selassie, crowned 5 years prior, sits behind a vast desk. With him are Belit Wold and the head of the Imperial Navy, a small but professional force based in Menelikia. They are not discussing diplomacy. They are planning a campaign. The British have closed the front door, the Emperor says, his voice calm and measured. We will enter through every window, every crack in the wall. They wish to fight an economic war. We will give them one. The plan they devise is audacious. It is a state-sponsored, industrial-scale smuggling operation. The target is not the well-policed markets of Europe, but the soft, vulnerable underbelly of the British Empire, Egypt and the Sudan. These are the very territories Britain claims to be protecting from Ethiopian aggression. Ethiopia will now attack them not with soldiers, but with cheap goods, aiming to bankrupt their British-owned and protected industries. Belit Wold is the campaign's field marshal. He retools his factories, focusing on producing a few standardized types of cotton cloth, simple, durable fabrics that are the staple of the Egyptian and Sudanese markets. He can produce them better and cheaper than anyone else. The logistical side is handed to the Navy. They don't use their few modern gunboats. Instead, they activate a ghost fleet. They recruit hundreds of dhow captains in Menelikia and along the Somali coast, men who have sailed the Red Sea for generations, who know every hidden cove, every treacherous reef, every current and wind pattern. These ancient trade routes, used for centuries to move spices, ivory, and incense, are now repurposed to move contraband textiles. You are now on the deck of one of these dhows, a vessel of dark, weathered wood, its triangular sail catching the night wind. The ship is low in the water, its hold packed tight with canvas-wrapped bales of cloth, each bearing the discreet stamp of the Imperial Awash Textile Company. You sail without lights, part of a silent flotilla that scatters and regroups, communicating with shielded lanterns. The captain, a grizzled old Somali, with a face like a sea chart, is navigating by the stars. He is not a patriot fighting for the emperor's ideology. He is a businessman, and the emperor is paying him a fortune in silver coin for every successful delivery. The risk is immense. You see the searchlight of a British destroyer sweep across the water in the distance. The dhow's crew freezes, flattening themselves against the deck. The beam passes over them, a finger of white light probing the darkness, and moves on. The British Navy is the most powerful in the world, but the Red Sea is vast, and the dhows are small, numerous, and almost invisible to the new technology of the era. For every 10 ships that set out, 7 or 8 make it through. It is a cost of doing business that Belit Wold has already calculated into his margins. The destination is a moonless beach 100 miles south of Suez. Here, you witness the other end of the supply chain. Egyptian merchants, members of nationalist cells who see this as a blow against the British occupier, are waiting with teams of camels. The bales are quickly unloaded, the dhow captain is paid, and the ship melts back into the darkness. By dawn, the cloth is on its way to the sprawling markets of Cairo. You are in the Khan El Khalili Bazaar. The effect of the smuggled cloth is catastrophic. A local merchant unrolls 2 bolts of white cotton. One is from the local Egyptian mill, a coarse, slightly yellowish fabric. The other, the Ethiopian product, is a brilliant white, the weave finer and stronger, and it is 30% cheaper. The choice is no choice at all. Within months, the market is flooded. The warehouses of the Egyptian textile companies are overflowing with unsold inventory. They cannot compete. The consequences are swift and brutal. You are outside the gates of a large British-owned spinning mill in Alexandria. A notice has been posted. The mill is closing. Hundreds of workers, the same men who have been driven from their dying farms by the thirst of the Nile, are now being driven from their factory jobs by this new economic flood. Their simmering anger, born of hunger, now boils over into rage. Riots erupt. The offices of British-owned companies are set on fire. The nationalist agitators now have an army of unemployed, desperate men to fuel their cause. Sir Miles Lampson, in Cairo, telegraphs London in a panic. The Ethiopian economic offensive has done more to destabilize Egypt in 6 months than nationalist propaganda has in 60 years. We are losing control. The news reaches Manchester, the industrial heart of the British Empire. The great mills of Lancashire, already suffering from the global depression, are now being undercut in their own colonial markets by an African upstart. The Manchester Chamber of Commerce sends a furious delegation to Parliament. They demand action. This is no longer a distant colonial squabble over a river. It is a direct attack on British jobs and British industry. The response from London is an escalation. The Royal Navy's Red Sea Patrol is doubled. The rules of engagement are changed. They are now authorized to board and seize any vessel suspected of carrying contraband. This leads to a tense standoff. You are on the bridge of HMS Dauntless, a British cruiser. They have cornered a large, motorized cargo ship flying the German flag, a vessel chartered by Belit Wold's trading company. The British captain demands to board. The German captain, under orders from Berlin, refuses, citing freedom of the seas. For 12 hours, the 2 ships stare each other down. Cannons trained, sailors at battle stations. The world holds its breath. A single stray shot could ignite a conflict far beyond the Red Sea. Finally, After frantic diplomatic cables between London and Berlin, the Germans agree to an inspection in the neutral port of Jeddah. The incident is resolved without bloodshed, but the message is clear. The Cotton War has turned the Red Sea from a British lake into a contested international waterway. Ethiopia, through its sheer industrial might and cunning strategy, has successfully shattered the British embargo, destabilized its most important protectorate, and turned a regional dispute into a global diplomatic crisis. Belit Wold, reading the reports in his Addis Ababa office, allows himself a rare smile. It is a moment of pure triumph. His nation has met the world's greatest empire in a field of battle of its own choosing, and has won a decisive victory. The chalice of success is raised high, but the poison continues to concentrate. The British are now utterly humiliated, their desire for a diplomatic solution replaced by a cold, burning need for retribution. They will not forget this. And within Ethiopia, the success of the industrial elite further cements their power, making them ever more arrogant, ever more dismissive of the deep, structural problems, the alienated aristocracy, the exploited workers, the resentful church that are festering in the heart of their glorious, victorious, and increasingly fragile empire. The year is 1936. You are in a district of Addis Ababa that did not exist 20 years ago. It is called Kazanchis, but the locals have a different name for it. The City of Steam. There are no eucalyptus trees here, only the stark geometry of worker housing blocks, laid out in grids around the factories that are their reason for being. The air itself is different. It does not carry the scent of coffee or roasting grain, but the metallic tang of coal smoke, the chemical sharpness of dye works, and the sweet, cloying smell of the brewery that operates day and night. The rhythm of life here is not governed by the sun or the liturgical calendar of the Orthodox Church. It is governed by the factory whistle, a shrill, imperious blast that calls the living to their machines and releases them, exhausted, 12 hours later. This is the thriving, beating heart of the new Ethiopia, the engine room of the victory in the Cotton War. But you can feel a sickness in its soul. You walk the streets after the evening whistle has blown. The new currency, the birr, flows freely here. It flows into the tea houses, which are no longer quiet establishments for sipping honey wine, but raucous, crowded taverns where men drink a harsh, distilled grain alcohol called arak. It flows into gambling dens where fortunes are won and lost on the turn of a card. It flows into the pockets of merchants selling cheap, glittering trinkets and foreign-style clothing that would be scandalous in a country village. You see the social fabric woven over centuries of tradition, unraveling thread by thread. Families are fractured, with men living in barracks while their wives and children remain in distant villages. The authority of village elders is meaningless here. The cohesive, communal life of the parish has been replaced by the atomized, anonymous existence of the urban proletariat. And the church, the institution that for 1600 years has been the anchor of Ethiopian life, finds itself adrift in this new, turbulent sea. The local priests are overwhelmed, their warnings against sin and temptation drowned out by the roar of the machines and the siren call of cash. Into this spiritual vacuum steps a man of fire. His name is Abba Johannes. He is not a polished bishop from the capital, but a monk from the austere, rock-hewn monasteries of Lalibela, a man whose faith is as hard and unyielding as the stone from which his former home was carved. He was sent to Addis Ababa to minister to the growing population of a new parish in the City of Steam. What he found there horrified him. He did not see progress. He saw a new Babylon, a city of greed and spiritual degradation, built by men who had forgotten God. You see him for the first time in a muddy, open space that serves as a marketplace. He is not preaching from a pulpit. He stands on an empty wooden crate, his face gaunt, his eyes burning with a zealot's fire. His black monk's robes a stark contrast to the grimy work clothes of the crowd that gathers around him. His voice is not soothing. It is a lash. "They offer you the sermon of the machine," he cries, his voice raw with passion, carrying over the din of the city. And what is its gospel? The gospel of the eternally turning wheel. The gospel of the ever-hungry furnace. It preaches a new trinity. The turbine, the loom, and the coin. It promises you a paradise of worldly goods, but it demands a tithe of your soul. His message is electric. He speaks a language these displaced people understand. He gives voice to their alienation, their exhaustion, their sense that in gaining a wage, they have lost something precious and irreplaceable. He is not just condemning the obvious sins of drink and gambling. He is attacking the very foundations of the new order. The leaders in their palaces and their fine European houses tell you this is victory, he preaches, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that draws the crowd closer. They tell you the wealth of the factory is the strength of Ethiopia. I tell you it is a poison. It is the wealth of a man who sells his ancestral land to buy a single fine meal. You have traded the eternal blessing of the soil for the fleeting curse of the coin. You are becoming slaves not to a foreign master, but to the machine itself. His fame grows. His outdoor sermons begin to attract thousands. He is the voice of a growing, powerful counter-revolution. He finds a ready and powerful ally in the dispossessed aristocracy. You are there to witness the secret meeting between Abba Yohannes and Ras Mengesha, the old nobleman from Shewa. They meet not in a palace or a church, but at a remote ancient monastery, a place of sanctuary, the Ras. His face etched with bitterness, sees in this fiery monk the key to reclaiming his lost world. "You speak of the soul, Holy Father." Mengesha says, "I speak of the body of the nation, which is being eaten alive by these merchants and their machines. Our goals are the same. A dangerous alliance is forged. The aristocrats, with their regional power, their networks of loyalty, and their hidden armories, will provide the muscle. The church, through preachers like Abba Yohannes, will provide the soul, the moral justification for rebellion. They will frame the coming conflict not as a political struggle, but as a holy war to save Ethiopia from a new internal paganism, the worship of the machine. The movement reaches its zenith on the festival of Timkat, the Epiphany, one of the holiest days in the Orthodox calendar. In Addis Ababa, a vast crowd has gathered for the traditional procession. But this year is different. Abba Yohannes and his followers effectively hijack the ceremony. As the official procession, led by the government-appointed Abuna, the head of the church, begins its solemn march, Yohannes appears with a massive, hand-carved wooden cross, surrounded by thousands of his followers, including Ras Mengesha, and a contingent of armed retainers in their traditional garb. They block the path of the official procession. Abba Yohannes climbs the steps of the great St. George's Cathedral, the site of Haile Selassie's own coronation. From there, he delivers the sermon that will ignite the civil war. He does not just attack the industrialists, he attacks the emperor himself. For 16 centuries, the Lion of Judah has carried the title Defender of the Faith, he thunders, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the square. But what faith does our emperor now defend? The faith of the smokestack, the faith of the balance sheet. He has allowed the blasphemy of the Great Dam to choke the sacred Gihon, the river that flows from paradise. He has allowed our people to be herded into these godless cities. He has allied himself with the makers of coin, not the keepers of the faith. He has broken the covenant between God, the emperor, and the people of Ethiopia is void. This is an act of unimaginable rebellion. It is not just a criticism, it is a spiritual delegitimization of the monarchy itself. He is declaring the emperor a heretic, an apostate, a man who has forfeited his divine right to rule. The crowd, a volatile mix of the devout, the dispossessed, and the merely curious, roars its approval. The official procession dissolves in chaos. The Abuna is forced to retreat. The guards of Ras Mengesha stand firm, their rifles held ready. For a few tense hours, the rebels control the spiritual heart of the capital. Emperor Haile Selassie is now faced with the ultimate crisis. He has defeated the Italians. He has outmaneuvered the British Empire. But this is a threat he cannot meet with artillery or economic warfare. It is a war for the nation's very identity. He has seen the new industrialists as the engine of his power, a tool to forge a modern state. But he has neglected the deep, powerful currents of faith and tradition that still define the vast majority of his people. He believed he could control both, could be both the modernizing autocrat and the divinely appointed emperor. The sermon of the machine has forced a choice. The great victory of the Abyssinian Model, the triumph of industrialization, has created a society so fractured, so spiritually adrift, that the very church that crowned him is now poised to declare him an enemy of God. The chalice, once filled with the promise of a glorious future, is now brimming with the bitter poison of holy war. The year is 1937. You are in Istanbul, a city caught between the ghosts of empire and the stark ambitions of a new republic. In the opulent Dolmabahce Palace, two men are meeting in a room overlooking the Bosphorus, the very waterway that has defined the strategic fortunes of this region for 2,000 years. The meeting itself is a historical impossibility, a complete reversal of a century of rivalry. On one side sits Sir Percy Lorraine, the British ambassador to Turkey, a man whose entire career has been dedicated to managing the decline of the Ottoman Empire and securing British dominance in the Near East. Across from him sits Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the President of the Turkish Republic, a man who forged his nation in the fires of a war of independence fought against Allied powers, including Britain. There should be nothing but suspicion and historical enmity between them. But they have a common problem, a problem that has risen, unforeseen and powerful, to their south, the problem of Ethiopia. For Atatürk, the threat is ideological and economic. The Ethiopian Empire's brand of successful monarchical, faith-infused modernization is a direct affront to his own secular, republican revolution. More practically, the flood of cheap Ethiopian textiles has begun to damage Turkey's own nascent industries, and Ethiopian influence is growing among the Muslim populations of Yemen and the Arabian Peninsula, encroaching on what Turkey sees as its historical sphere of influence. He fears the rise of a new, rival empire on the southern shores of the Red Sea. For Lorraine, the problem is more immediate and existential. The news from Addis Ababa is both promising and terrifying. His intelligence reports speak of the growing rebellion, of the alliance between the church and the aristocracy. Ethiopia is weakening from within. This is the opportunity Britain has been waiting for. But the chaos also presents a risk. If the emperor falls, what comes next? A fanatical theocracy under Abba Yohannes? A fractured kingdom that descends into decades of civil war, destabilizing the entire Horn of Africa? Or worse, a military coup led by a general who might be even more aggressive than Haile Selassie? Britain does not just want a weaker Ethiopia. It wants a compliant, controllable Ethiopia. They need to manage the crisis, not just exploit it. It is Atatürk who makes the first, shocking proposal. Your empire and my republic have fought over the straits for centuries, he says, his voice a low growl, speaking through an interpreter. We both know that whoever controls the entrance to a sea controls the sea. You control Gibraltar and Suez. My nation now controls the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, but a new power seeks to control the Bab el-Mandeb, the southern gate to the Red Sea, an African power, armed with German machines and Japanese cunning. He lets the statement hang in the air. They have weaponized the Nile against your Egypt. They have weaponized trade against my factories. They sponsor sedition from Cairo to Ankara. We have a shared interest in containing this phenomenon. Halzenton 26. Sir Percy Lorraine, a master of the great game, understands the opening immediately. This is not about old rivalries. This is about the new reality. He is empowered by London to make a deal, and he knows this is the moment. Mr. President, he replies, His Majesty's government is in full agreement. The stability of the Red Sea and the security of the Nile are matters of international concern. Over the next week, in secret negotiations, they hammer out the details of an agreement that will redraw the strategic map of the entire region. It will be known as the Anglo-Turkish Pact, or more formally, the Treaty of Red Sea Security. It is, in its essence, a pact of containment. You see the clauses of the treaty as they are drafted. First, a naval agreement. The Turkish Navy, which has been rebuilding with German assistance, will be given access to British port facilities in Aden and Port Sudan. In return, the Turkish fleet will join the British in anti-piracy and anti-smuggling patrols in the southern Red Sea. Everyone knows the true target is not pirates, but the Ethiopian contraband trade. The ghost fleet of doughs that won the Cotton War will now face a two-navy blockade. Second, a military intelligence sharing agreement. Turkish intelligence, with its deep historical and cultural ties to the peoples of the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa, will coordinate its efforts with the British Secret Intelligence Service. They will share information on Ethiopian arms shipments, on the internal political situation, and, most importantly, they will coordinate their support for factions opposing the central government in Addis Ababa. Third, and most crucially, a clause on the protection of the Nile. Turkey, in its historic role as the seat of the Sunni Caliphate, will issue a formal declaration of support for the Muslim populations of Egypt and the Sudan in their struggle against the water aggression of the Christian Ethiopian Empire. This is a masterstroke of political theatre. It reframes the conflict, transforming it from a colonial resource dispute into a religious struggle, a clash of civilizations. It allows Britain to hide its imperial interests behind the banner of pan-Islamic solidarity, isolating the Orthodox Christian Empire and putting immense pressure on its multi-religious, multi-ethnic society. The signing of the pact is a quiet event, but its announcement sends shockwaves across the globe. In Berlin and Tokyo, it is seen as a major strategic setback, an unexpected consolidation of British power. In Addis Ababa, the news is received with disbelief and fury. Emperor Haile Selassie is in his map room, staring at the Red Sea. For decades, his nation's foreign policy has been based on exploiting the rivalries between the European powers. He has played them off against each other with consummate skill. He never imagined that his two most significant regional rivals, Britain and Turkey, the old lion and the old wolf, would ever hunt together. The map, which once showed a land of opportunity, now looks like a cage. To the north, Anglo-Egyptian Sudan is a staging ground for a British-funded proxy war. To the east, the Red Sea, his nation's economic artery, is now being patrolled by the combined fleets of Britain and Turkey. To the south, in British Somaliland, reports are coming in of a new military build-up. Ethiopia is surrounded. The external pressure is now at its absolute maximum, at the precise moment that the internal situation is at its most fragile. The pact has an immediate effect on the internal rebellion. You are in a secret meeting in Ras Mengesha's mountain fortress. With him is a Turkish agent, a man who introduces himself as Mehmet. He does not come with promises of direct military aid. He brings something far more valuable: a guaranteed line of supply and a promise of international legitimacy. The President of the Turkish Republic recognizes the justice of your cause, Mehmet says, his Amharic fluent and persuasive. He sees you not as rebels, but as patriots, defending the true faith and traditions of your ancient land against a heretic emperor. The British will turn a blind eye as we supply you with what you need. Rifles, ammunition, and gold will flow across the border from the Sudan. You will not be alone. For Ras Mengesha and the traditionalist faction, this is a godsend. They are no longer an isolated group of rebels. They are now the Ethiopian front in a global struggle, backed by two major powers. Their holy war has just received the blessing of a foreign caliph and the tacit support of the British Empire. The Anglo-Turkish Pact is the culmination of all of Ethiopia's successes. The victory at Adwa, the industrialization, the taking of the port, the taming of the Nile, the triumph in the Cotton War. Each brilliant success created a new and more powerful enemy. Each victory added another layer of poison to the chalice. Now, the accumulated resentments of the world have coalesced into a single, overwhelming alliance of containment. The empire, which rose so proudly on its own terms, now finds itself utterly besieged, its internal enemies emboldened and armed by its external foes. The grand strategy of playing the great powers against each other has failed. The great powers are now playing their own game, using the fractured soul of Ethiopia as their chessboard. The year is 1938. The strategic encirclement of the Anglo-Turkish Pact is no longer an abstract threat on a map. It is a grinding, daily reality. The port of Menelikia, once a symbol of Ethiopia's triumphant entry into the world, is now half paralyzed. The blockade is not total, but it is strangling. German and Japanese ships still run the gauntlet, but insurance rates have skyrocketed, and the flow of goods has slowed to a trickle. Inside the empire, the consequences are cascading. The great industrial machine, so dependent on imported machine tools, spare parts, and raw materials not found in the highlands, is beginning to seize up. You are back in the city of steam, the industrial heartland of Addis Ababa. The symphony of the factory has changed its tune. The relentless, 24-hour roar has been replaced by a fitful, sputtering rhythm. Some of the looms in Belit Wold's textile mills are silent, waiting for replacement parts from Germany that may never arrive. The chemical plant has cut production by half, rationing its dwindling supply of imported sulfur. The government, needing every spare rifle and bullet for the growing insurgency in the north, has requisitioned the entire output of the munitions factories. The export-driven boom that created this city is over. The first casualty is the workers' wage. With profits plummeting, factory owners like Belit Wold, once hailed as national heroes, are forced to make brutal choices. They cut wages, they extend hours, they lay off workers. The social contract of the Abyssinian Model, the unspoken promise that in exchange for their grueling labour, the state would provide a path to a better, more prosperous life, is being broken. You are standing in a crowded, muddy square in the heart of the Oromo workers' district. You are listening to a man who is not a priest, not a nobleman, and not an industrialist. His name is Tades. and he is a new kind of leader, one forged in the heat and noise of the factory floor. Addis is an Oromo, from a village in the south that was forcibly relocated to make way for a state-run coffee plantation 2 decades ago. He has spent his entire adult life as a cog in the industrial machine, but he is a cog that has learned to think. In secret, after his 12-hour shifts, he and a small group of fellow workers have been reading. They have read not the Bible or the patriotic histories of the empire, but forbidden texts, smuggled into the country by sailors in Menelikya, the works of Marx, of Lenin, of union organizers from the mines of Wales, and the factories of the Ruhr Valley. These ideas, which once seemed like abstract theories from a distant world, now resonate with the brutal clarity of lived experience. Addis sees the world not as a struggle between tradition and modernity, or between Ethiopia and Britain, but as a struggle between those who own the machines and those who operate them. The nobles and the priests tell you that the machine is a sin, Addis shouts, his voice hoarse but powerful, speaking to a crowd of thousands of his fellow workers. Belitwold and the Emperor tell you the machine is our salvation. They are both lying. The machine is a tool. The question is, who holds the tool? Who profits from the tool? We stand here, our wages cut, our brothers sent home, while Belitwold still drives his German car, while the Emperor feasts in his palace. The British blockade did not break the machine. It merely revealed who the machine truly serves. He is articulating a third way, a new ideology that cuts across the existing fault lines of the conflict. He is giving a name to the suffering of the urban proletariat, and he is giving them a new enemy, not the foreign imperialist, not the traditionalist rebel, but their own bosses, their own government. They tell us we must sacrifice for the nation. He continues, his voice rising to a roar. But who is the nation? Are we not the nation? We who dig the coal? We who smelt the iron? We who weave the cloth? Or is the nation only a handful of men in suits in Addis Ababa? They demand our loyalty, but they give us nothing but poverty in return. We have built their modern Ethiopia with our hands, with our sweat, with our lives. It is time we demanded our share. The speech is the spark. The next morning the factory whistles blow, but no one goes to work. The city of steam falls silent. From the textile mills to the munitions plants, the workers have walked out. They are not rioting. They are organized. Pickets appear at the factory gates. Their signs, written in Amharic and Oromo, are simple and direct. A living wage, an 8-hour day, representation. The Oromo general strike has begun. It is a strategic masterstroke, a dagger aimed at the heart of the war effort. The government, already fighting a brutal counterinsurgency against the traditionalist rebels in the north, now finds its entire industrial base paralyzed. The munitions factories in Harar, staffed largely by Somali workers who have their own historical grievances, join the strike in solidarity. The flow of ammunition to the front lines ceases. Emperor Haile Selassie is caught in a pincer movement of his own making. In the north, he faces a rebellion from the past, from the forces of tradition he tried to sideline. In the capital, he now faces a rebellion from the future, from the new industrial working class he created. Both rebellions are a direct consequence of the poisoned chalice of rapid, state-led industrialization. He cannot give in to the strikers' demands. To do so would be to admit the failure of his model and embolden a new, radical political force. But he cannot let the strike continue. To do so would be to lose the war against the traditionalists. You are in the emergency meeting of the Crown Council. The room is filled with military men and industrialists. Belitwold is there, his face pale with fury and fear. He urges a swift, brutal crackdown. This is not a labor dispute, he argues. This is sedition. It is a revolution. They are strangling the nation at its moment of greatest peril. We must make an example of them. Use the army, break the strike, and hang the leaders. General Tafari, the old war hawk, now the Minister of War, agrees. The army's loyalty is to the emperor, not to a mob of factory workers. We have divisions in the capital. We can have the factories running again within 48 hours. There are a few dissenting voices. Older advisors who warn that turning the army on the very people who produce its weapons will create a wound that will never heal, that it will shatter the myth of national unity forever. But they are overruled. The decision is made. The state, which has used its industrial and military power to defeat foreign enemies and intimidate its neighbors, will now turn that power inward against its own citizens. In the city of Steam, the strikers hold firm. They have taken control of their neighborhoods, forming committees, organizing food distribution, and maintaining a disciplined, non-violent resistance. Addis, their leader, knows the risks. He knows the history of his people, the long story of their subjugation by the Amharic highlanders. He hopes the emperor will see reason, that he will negotiate. He is fighting for a place at the table, not to overturn it. But the time for negotiation is over. As dawn breaks on the third day of the strike, you hear a new sound. It is not the sound of the factory whistle. It is the low, ominous rumble of military trucks. You see them from a window in Addis's makeshift headquarters. Long columns of them, filled with soldiers in combat gear. The same soldiers who are heroes of the nation, the guardians of its independence. They are carrying the Tuodros Type 11 rifle, the weapon that saved the nation at Adwa. Today, they are pointing those rifles at their own countrymen. The industrial machine has not only created a new working class, it has also created the means to discipline it. The final, most bitter poison in the chalice is the one a nation forces upon itself. The year is 1938. The dawn that breaks over Addis Ababa is cold and grey. The sky the colour of old steel. There is no birdsong. There is only a profound, unnatural silence. The silence of a city holding its breath. In the industrial districts, the striking workers, led by Addis, have barricaded their streets with overturned carts, oil drums, and piles of cobblestones. Their mood is not one of revolution, but of grim determination. They are not armed for a fight. They are standing their ground, a vast, silent protest of folded arms and resolute faces. They still believe, in some small corner of their hearts, that the emperor, the father of the nation, will not turn his army upon his own children. It is a fatal miscalculation. You are with Emperor Haile Selassie in the Menelik Palace. He stands before a large window, looking down upon his capital. He is a man trapped by the relentless logic of his own creation. To preserve the state, he must preserve the industrial base. To preserve the industrial base, he must break the strike. To break the strike, he must use the only tool he has left that has not failed him, the army. He has spent his entire life building this modern, centralized state, defending it from enemies without. Now, to save it, he feels he must crush the enemies within. He gives the final command. The word is go. It is a word that, once spoken, can never be taken back. You are now standing with Addis behind a barricade in the city of Steam. He can hear the rumble of the army trucks getting closer. He sees the first lines of soldiers marching in perfect formation, their bayonets fixed and gleaming in the weak morning light. They are his countrymen. Some are Amhara, yes, but many are Oromo like himself, conscripts from the south. He raises a handheld megaphone, a device powered by a dry cell battery. "Brothers!" he calls out, his voice echoing in the silent streets. "We are not your enemy. The men in the factories are not your enemy. We are the hands that forged the rifles you carry. We ask only for justice, for a fair wage, for a life of dignity. Do not raise your arms against your own kin." For a moment that stretches into an eternity, his words seem to work. The front line of soldiers hesitates. You can see the conflict on their young faces. They are farmers' sons, and they are looking at men who could be their fathers, their brothers, their cousins. An officer, a man with the rigid posture of the military academy, barks an order. The soldiers raise their rifles, but they do not fire. They are pointing them over the heads of the crowd, a warning. Then, from behind the infantry, a new sound emerges. A harsh, mechanical clatter. It is a sound that does not belong in a city street. 3 armoured cars, squat, grey machines fitted with heavy machine guns, roll into the square. They are the pride of the modern army. Their armour plates forged in Gondar. Their guns assembled in Harar. They are the ultimate expression of the state's power. Mobile fortresses of industrial might. They stop. Their turrets swivel, the muzzles of the machine guns sweeping across the unarmed crowd. There is a moment of absolute stillness. Then the officer gives another command. The sound that follows is the sound of a world ending. The machine guns open up, not firing into the air, but directly into the crowd. The noise is a physical force, a relentless, deafening hammering that tears the air and the flesh apart. The disciplined, non-violent protest dissolves into a canvas of pure, primal horror. The front ranks of the crowd cease to be people and become a red mist. Tades, standing on a crate to address the soldiers, is one of the first to be cut down. There is no heroic last stand, no final defiant cry. There is only the brutal industrial efficiency of the machine gun, a weapon designed for the battlefield, now turned upon the factory yard. The massacre lasts for less than 5 minutes, but it is an eternity of slaughter. When the guns fall silent, the square is a charnel house. The silence that follows is more terrible than the noise. The surviving workers, their spirits shattered, their leaders dead, break and flee. The soldiers, many of them looking physically ill, their faces ashen with shock at what they have been ordered to do, advance over the bodies of their countrymen. This is the year of red iron. The name is born in whispers, in the days that follow. Red, for the blood that stained the streets of the capital. Iron for the cold, unfeeling machinery of the state that spilled it. The strike is broken. The army seizes control of the factories, herding the terrified workers back to their machines at bayonet point. The industrial heart of the nation begins to beat again, but it is a zombie-like rhythm, devoid of life or spirit. Production resumes, but the soul of the workforce is dead. News of the massacre, the Red Iron Massacre, spreads like a virus through the empire. In the north, the traditionalist rebels, led by Ras Mengesha and inspired by Abba Yohannes, receive the news with a mixture of horror and grim vindication. This, they proclaim, is the true face of the emperor's modern state. This is the sermon of the machine made manifest. We told you he had abandoned God. Abba Yohannes preaches to his growing army of followers. Now you see, he has abandoned man as well. He is not a king, he is a butcher. This is not a rebellion. It is a holy duty to cleanse the land of a great evil. The massacre becomes their greatest recruiting tool. The ranks of the rebel forces swell with peasants who now see the emperor not as a distant, divinely appointed ruler, but as a tyrant who murders his own people. The civil war, which had been a simmering, low-level insurgency, now explodes into a full-scale conflagration. The most profound damage, however, is done to the nation's founding myth. The story of modern Ethiopia was a story of unity. It was the story of a proud, independent people, Amhara, Tigrayan, Oromo, Somali, all together, standing as one against the foreign invader. The victory at Adwa was not just a military triumph. It was the sacred text of this national religion. The army was its high priesthood, the symbol of that unified will, the guardian of all Ethiopians. In the year of Red Iron, that myth is murdered. The army, the hero of Adwa, has been used to slaughter the sons and grandsons of the men who fought at Adwa. The state, created to protect the people, has declared war upon them. The emperor, the symbol of unity, has become the great divider. He has won the battle of the City of Steam, but in doing so, he has lost the war for the loyalty and love of his people. You are in the palace once more. The emperor is alone. The reports on his desk tell him that the factories are running again. The flow of ammunition to the northern front has resumed. From a purely logistical perspective, the operation was a success. But the price is written in the invisible ink of his people's trust. He has preserved the body of his state, but he has ripped out its heart. He has proven that the Abyssinian model, when pushed to its limits, has only one answer to dissent: overwhelming, brutal force. The victory is absolute. The chalice is full, and the poison has now been drunk, not by his enemies, but by the emperor himself. He has become the tyrant he never wanted to be, to save the empire he had built. And he knows, in the terrible silence of his palace, that it can never be the same again. The year is 1939. The world is hurtling toward a global war. Germany has annexed the Sudetenland and is eyeing Poland. The Empire of Japan, Ethiopia's first and most crucial partner, is bogged down in a brutal, sprawling war in China. In Tokyo, the government is a tense coalition of military factions and civilian bureaucrats, their focus consumed by the vast continental struggle and the growing threat of the United States in the Pacific. News from their strange, distant African ally is filtered through this lens of grand strategic priority. You are in the offices of the Gaimusho, the Japanese Foreign Ministry. A junior diplomat, Ito Kenji, is tasked with compiling the Africa brief for the foreign minister. For years, the Ethiopian file was a source of pride, a case study in successful Meiji-era foreign policy. Japan had helped create a non-Western industrial power, a strategic partner, a thorn in the side of the British Empire, and a valuable trading partner. Tanaka Kenshin's gamble in 1856 had paid off spectacularly. But the recent cables from the Japanese legation in Addis Ababa are deeply troubling. They speak not of industrial progress, but of massacres and civil war. They describe the Red Iron Massacre in stark, unambiguous terms. The report Ito drafts is a masterpiece of diplomatic understatement, but its conclusions are damning. The regime of Emperor Haile Selassie, he writes, has successfully suppressed the labor unrest in the capital. However, this was achieved at a significant cost to its domestic legitimacy and international standing. The ongoing insurgency in the northern provinces has now escalated into a full civil war, absorbing the majority of the imperial army's resources. The Anglo-Turkish blockade has severely curtailed economic output. The state's long-term stability is now in considerable doubt. When the foreign minister reads the brief, he sees the situation not through a moral lens, but a strategic one. Ethiopia, once a valuable asset, is rapidly becoming a liability. It is unstable, unpredictable, and entangled in a conflict with Great Britain, a nation Japan is desperately trying to avoid antagonizing further while it deals with China and America. The Abyssinian reality, is no longer a romantic story of shared defiance against the West. It is a messy, complicated problem. The dilemma comes to a head in a stark, pragmatic way. You are in a meeting of the Imperial General Headquarters, the Supreme Council of military and government leaders. They are discussing the global allocation of resources. The Minister of War is on his feet. "We are stretched to the limit," he states flatly. "The Kwantung Army in China needs every rifle and every shell we can produce. The Navy requires a vast budget to prepare for a potential conflict with the Americans. We can no longer afford to extend favorable credits and ship valuable machine tools to an African nation that is collapsing into civil war." A representative from the Ministry of Commerce speaks next. "The Ethiopian trade, once profitable, is now a net loss. The British blockade makes shipping to Menelikia a high-risk, low-reward venture. Our German allies are finding the same. The trade route is effectively closed. From a purely economic standpoint, continued support is unsustainable. This is the cold, hard logic of empire. The 80-year-old Pact, the Sakura and the Lion, forged in a dusty workshop between two men who shared a dream of defiance, is about to be sacrificed on the altar of global realpolitik. The foreign minister makes the final argument. The Anglo-Turkish Pact has changed the strategic calculus. Siding with Ethiopia now means siding against both Britain and Turkey, further isolating our own empire at a critical moment. It gains us nothing and risks everything. Our priority must be our own national interest. The decision is made. It is not a dramatic severing of ties. It is a quiet, bureaucratic strangulation. The Japanese ambassador in Addis Ababa is instructed to express grave concern over the internal violence. He is to politely defer any new requests for military or industrial aid, citing the immense pressures of the situation in China. The flow of Japanese advisors, which had been a constant for decades, ceases. The last few remaining engineers and military trainers are quietly recalled home. You are in the Imperial Palace in Addis Ababa when Emperor Haile Selassie receives the final, devastating diplomatic note from his Japanese ambassador. The note is filled with the usual polite, effusive language of friendship and mutual respect. But its core message, buried beneath layers of diplomatic courtesy, is a clear and final abandonment. Japan is turning its back. For the emperor, this is the ultimate betrayal. The Japanese alliance was the bedrock of his nation's entire modernization project. It was more than a partnership. It was a validation. It was proof that a non-Western path to power was possible. He had always believed that in a final confrontation with the West, Japan would be his ultimate guarantor. Now, at his moment of greatest need, his oldest friend has walked away, leaving him utterly alone, surrounded by enemies and presiding over a nation at war with itself. The news of the Japanese withdrawal spreads quickly through the corridors of power. To the embattled government, it is a catastrophic blow to both morale and material. But to the rebel factions, it is a sign of divine favor. You are in the camp of the traditionalist rebels in the northern mountains. Abba Johannes, the fiery monk, holds up a copy of the official government newspaper, announcing the successful conclusion of the Japanese advisory mission. "Behold!" he cries to the assembled fighters. "Even the pagans from the east can no longer stomach the stench of this godless regime. They have abandoned the heretic emperor to his fate. The god of Ethiopia is with us. He is stripping the butcher of Addis Ababa of his false friends, one by one, before he delivers the final judgment." The Japanese decision has an immediate and decisive impact on the Anglo-Turkish Pact. For months, they had been content to contain Ethiopia, to let it bleed slowly from its internal wounds. But with Japan, the one great power that might have intervened now officially neutral, the calculation changes. The risk of escalating the conflict has vanished. You are back in Istanbul. in another meeting between the British ambassador and the Turkish president. This time, the mood is not one of cautious negotiation, but of predatory opportunity. "The last piece has been removed from the board," Sir Percy Lorraine says. "There will be no external intervention. The regime is isolated and fighting a two-front war. It is time to move from containment to resolution." Ataturk nods, a grim smile on his face. "My forces in eastern Anatolia are ready. Your fleet in Aden controls the sea. We must support the legitimate opposition and bring about a swift end to the chaos." The legitimate opposition they choose is, of course, the traditionalist rebellion. They are not ideal partners. The British are wary of their religious fanaticism, and the Turks are suspicious of their feudal lords, but they are the only faction with the power to topple the emperor. And, most importantly, they are seen as weak, agrarian, and anti-modern. A government led by Rusman Gesher and Abba Yohannes would, they believe, immediately dismantle the industrial base, repeal the aggressive foreign policy, and reopen the Nile. They would be pliable, a return to a pre-industrial Ethiopia that would no longer be a threat. The Tokyo dilemma has been resolved in the worst possible way for Haile Selassie. His founding partner has abandoned him, and in doing so has given a green light to his enemies to move in for the kill. The final act of the tragedy is about to begin. The great industrial empire, built with such pride and ambition, is now set to be torn apart, its fate to be decided not by its own people, but by the cynical calculations of foreign powers who see its collapse as a means to their own ends. The year is 1940. While the world's attention is fixed on the fall of France and the Blitz in London, a different, older kind of war is reaching its climax in the highlands of Ethiopia. The kingdom is unraveling. The civil war, once a ragged insurgency, has transformed. The Anglo-Turkish Pact has moved from covert support to a full-scale proxy intervention. The traditionalist rebellion is no longer an army of peasants with captured rifles. It is now the Army of National Restoration, a well-equipped, well-fed force, its ranks swelled by defectors and mercenaries, its logistics managed by Turkish officers operating from bases in the Sudan, its coffers filled with British gold. You are at a forward operating base of this new army, hidden in the rugged Simien Mountains. The change is astonishing. The soldiers are no longer in white shamas. They wear Turkish, supplied khaki uniforms. The old Martini Henry rifles are gone, replaced by modern German Mausers, part of a shipment arranged by Turkish intelligence. You see teams of British sappers, advisors, in all but name, teaching the rebels how to use explosives to demolish railway bridges and communication lines. Rusman Gesher, once a bitter, defeated feudal lord, is now the nominal commander-in-chief, poring over tactical maps with a Turkish colonel at his side. He has the weapons and the backing he always craved, but you can see in his eyes that he is no longer the master of this movement. He is a figurehead, a useful tool for foreign powers. The true leader is still Abba Yohannes. His power has only grown. He is the spiritual heart of the rebellion, and his message has become harder, more apocalyptic. He preaches that the final battle is at hand, a cleansing fire that will purge the land of the heretic emperor and his godless machines. His sermons are no longer just about spiritual decay. They are a call for the complete destruction of the modern world that Haile Selassie has built. We will tear down the factories and replant the fields of our fathers, he proclaims. We will demolish the Great Dam and release the Holy River from its chains. We will burn the books of foreign knowledge and restore the wisdom of the scriptures. We will cleanse this land with fire and faith. While the traditionalists advance from the north, a second front opens. In the south and east, The long simmering resentments of the Oromo and Somali peoples, brutally suppressed during the year of red iron, explode into open revolt. Addis, the martyred labor leader, has become a folk hero, a symbol of resistance. His surviving lieutenants, radicalized by the massacre and secretly armed by British agents from Somaliland, have organized a new generation of fighters. They are not fighting for the restoration of a feudal kingdom. They are fighting for their own liberation, for an independent Oromia, for a socialist republic. They are the Addis Liberation Front, and they begin a campaign of guerrilla warfare, attacking government convoys, assassinating officials, and plunging the entire south into chaos. Ethiopia is now caught in a three-way civil war. The central government, the imperial faction, is a hollowed-out shell. Its army is demoralized, stretched thin, fighting a war on two fronts. Its industrial base is crippled. Its international allies are gone. Emperor Haile Selassie is a prisoner in his own capital, a king ruling over a city-state. His world has shrunk to the Menelik Palace and the fortified army barracks that surround it. You are with him in the final days. The emperor is a shadow of his former self. The calm, calculating strategist is gone, replaced by a weary, haunted man. He sees the treachery everywhere. He sees the ghosts of the workers he ordered, shot down in the streets. He sees the failure of his life's work, an empire built to defy the world, now being consumed by it. He spends his days poring over maps, moving unit markers that represent divisions that exist only on paper, their ranks depleted by desertions and battlefield losses. The final offensive begins. The Army of National Restoration, in a massive, coordinated assault, breaks through the last imperial defensive lines on the northern approaches to Addis Ababa. Their advance is spearheaded by a frightening new element. A dozen light tanks, old but effective First World War-era models, sold to Turkey by the Germans, and now crewed by rebel soldiers trained in the Sudan. The Emperor's army, with no effective anti-tank weapons, crumbles. Simultaneously, the Addis Liberation Front in the south cuts the vital railway line to the coast, the capital's last remaining lifeline to the outside world. Addis Ababa is completely surrounded. The battle for the capital is short and brutal. It is not a clash of armies, but the chaotic collapse of a regime. You see the fighting in the streets. Rebel soldiers, fired up by Abba Johannes's sermons, swarm through the city. They show no mercy. They see every symbol of modernity as a mark of heresy. They set fire to the university, to the National Library, to the Ministry of Information. They target the new industrial class. Belit Wold, the great industrialist, is dragged from his villa and lynched by a mob in the street, his body left hanging from a lamppost. The city's defenders, a few loyal units of the Imperial Guard, make their last stand around the palace complex. They are the elite, the best trained and best equipped soldiers in the empire, but they are hopelessly outnumbered. You witness the final assault on the palace gates, a scene of medieval fury and modern firepower. The rebels use a captured truck as a battering ram, while machine guns chatter from the palace walls. Inside, the emperor knows the end has come. His generals plead with him to flee, to escape via a secret route and lead a government in exile. He refuses. "I built this state," he says, his voice a whisper. "I will not outlive it." He walks out onto the palace steps, dressed not in his military uniform, but in the traditional white robes of an Ethiopian sovereign. He holds no weapon. He is a solitary, tragic figure, facing the maelstrom he unleashed. What happens next is lost to the chaos of conflicting accounts. Some say he was shot down immediately by a rebel soldier. Others say he was captured by Ras Mengesha's men and later quietly executed to prevent him from becoming a martyr. The only certainty is that by nightfall, the green, yellow, and red banner of the empire is torn down from the palace flagpole, and the ancient Solomonic dynasty, which has ruled for millennia, is extinguished. The unraveling kingdom has come to its bloody end. The victory of the rebels is absolute, but as the smoke clears over a burning Addis Ababa, you see not the dawn of a new, purified Ethiopia, but the beginning of a new, darker age. The fragile coalition that toppled the emperor is already fracturing. Ras Mengesha and the traditionalist nobles want to restore the old feudal order. Abba Johannes and his religious zealots want to create a theocracy. And in the south, the Tedesque Liberation Front has no intention of submitting to a new Highland master. They are fighting for their own nation. The foreign powers who engineered this collapse watch from a distance, their mission accomplished. They have shattered the one independent industrial power in Africa. They have turned a dangerous rival into a failed state. The poisoned chalice, offered with such promise 80 years before, has finally been drained to its last bitter dregs. And the contents were not just a slow-acting poison for a single regime, but a solvent that has dissolved an entire nation, leaving behind only chaos, bloodshed, and the ghosts of a future that might have been. The year is 1945. The Second World War has ended, and the great powers are drawing new lines on the map of the world. But in the Horn of Africa, there is no peace. The war that ended the empire was only the prelude. You are standing on the ruins of the Gondar Imperial Foundry, the very birthplace of Ethiopia's industrial dream. The great halls are skeletal remains, their roofs collapsed, their walls blackened by fire. The blast furnaces, once the roaring hearts of a new age, are now cold, silent tombs of rusted iron. A goat nibbles at a tough weed growing where the Bessemer converter once spat fire. This is the new reality. This is the empire of silence. The Army of National Restoration did not restore a nation. It shattered it. After the fall of Addis Ababa, the fragile alliance between the feudal lords and the religious zealots collapsed into a second, even more bitter civil war. Ras Mengesha, who dreamed of restoring his aristocratic privileges, was himself consumed by the holy fire he had helped unleash. He was declared a lukewarm believer by Abba Johannes's fanatical purifiers and executed, his head displayed on a pole in the same square where Belit Wold had been lynched. The victor in the north was theocracy. Abba Johannes now rules from Gondar, the old imperial capital, which he has renamed New Jerusalem. He is the Abuna Regent, the spiritual and temporal ruler of what he calls the purified kingdom of Ethiopia. It is a state built on the absolute rejection of the modern world. The factories have been systematically dismantled, their machinery broken up for scrap. The Great Dam of Tana was declared a blasphemy, and, in an act of supreme symbolic destruction, its turbine halls were dynamited, silencing the electric heart of the nation. The Nile flows freely once more, but the light of the cities has been extinguished. Life in the purified kingdom is a return to a dark, imagined past. Foreign books are burned. Schools have been replaced by monastic scriptoriums. The modern legal code has been abolished, replaced by a harsh interpretation of ancient religious law. Justice is meted out by priests in public floggings and stonings. It is an empire of silence, where dissent is heresy, and the only approved sound is the chanting of prayers. The clock has not just been stopped, it has been violently smashed and turned back 500 years. But this theocratic state does not rule over a unified Ethiopia. Its authority ends where the southern highlands begin. In the south, you find the other inheritor of the failed empire, the Socialist Republic of Oromia. The Addis Liberation Front, after years of brutal guerrilla warfare, has consolidated its control over the coffee-growing heartlands and the industrial ruins of the Addis Ababa region. Their capital is not the old city, which they see as a symbol of Amharic oppression, but a new settlement built around the shell of the Harar munitions factory. Their state is the mirror image of Abba Yohannes's theocracy. It is militantly secular, atheistic, and revolutionary. Churches and mosques have been turned into party headquarters and grain storage depots. The leaders are the veterans of the factory floor and the guerrilla war, hard men who speak the language of class struggle and historical materialism. They have attempted to restart some of the factories, but without the engineers, the spare parts, or the energy from the dam, their efforts are futile. Their republic is an impoverished, paranoid, militarized state ruled by a single party, its ideology a strange homegrown fusion of Marxist-Leninist theory and Oromo nationalism. The old Ethiopia is dead, fractured into two hostile, ideologically opposed successor states. The purified kingdom in the north, looking inward to a mythical past. The socialist republic in the south, looking outward for a revolutionary future that will never arrive. Between them lies a shattered borderland, a zone of permanent, low-intensity conflict where militias from both sides raid and skirmish. And what of the outside world? The powers who engineered this collapse. They have achieved their aims, but the outcome is not the stable, pliable region they had hoped for. You are in Cairo. The Nile flows again, the harvests have returned, and the threat of Ethiopian water blackmail is gone. The British have secured their primary objective, but they now face a new problem. Abba Yohannes's fanatical Christian theocracy, with its rhetoric of holy war, is a source of profound instability, threatening the Muslim populations of the Sudan and creating a new kind of ideological conflict. You are in Ankara. The Turkish government is equally dismayed. They back the traditionalists to create a weak, manageable neighbour. Instead, they have helped create a medieval theocracy on their southern flank that is far more unpredictable than the old empire ever was. You are in Menelikia, the port city. It is no longer Ethiopian. In the chaos of the civil war, the French, with British backing, reclaimed it. It is now once again Djibouti, a sleepy colonial outpost, its great piers and warehouses falling into disuse. The artery to the highlands has been severed. This is the final, bitter irony of the poisoned chalice. The great victory of industrialization and independence, which was meant to secure Ethiopia's future and guarantee its sovereignty, led directly to a sequence of events that destroyed the nation more completely than any foreign invasion ever could have. The pressures of rapid, forced development created fractures between classes, between ethnicities, between tradition and modernity that the ancient imperial structure could not withstand. The state became powerful enough to defy the world, but in doing so, it became powerful enough to destroy itself. The Abyssinian Model, once a beacon of hope for the colonized world, is now a cautionary tale, a subject of hushed, academic debate. It is a story of how a nation, in its desperate and brilliant attempt to seize the tools of modernity, to preserve its ancient identity, ended up creating a monster that consumed it from within. The success was the poison. Every triumph, the Foundries, the victory at Adwa, the dam, the economic warfare was another dose, making the state stronger on the outside while making it more brittle, more divided, more arrogant on the inside, until the day it simply shattered under the accumulated weight of its own contradictions. You stand one last time on the plains outside Gondar, looking at the silent, rusted ruins of the foundry. You feel the profound silence that has fallen over this land. It is the silence of a failed future, the silence of silenced machines, silenced cities, silenced dissent. The Empire of Silence is the final legacy of the poisoned chalice, a victory that left nothing worth winning. The great chalice of progress was offered, filled with the intoxicating wine of power, independence, and industrial might. Ethiopia, the Lion of Judah, drank deeply, and for a time became a giant in the world. It built forges that rivaled Europe's, raised an army that humbled an empire, and tamed a river that was the envy of the world. It became a symbol of a new path, a defiant, non-Western road to modernity. This was the promise of the Abyssinian Model, but the drink was a poison chalice. The very speed and force of the transformation was the poison. The industrialization that was meant to unite the nation against its external foes created deep, unhealable fractures within. It alienated the ancient nobility, it terrified the ancient church, and it forged a new working class it did not know how to manage, except with violence. Each victory, each proud achievement, only concentrated the poison further, breeding a hubris that made the regime blind to its own internal decay. In the end, the immense power the state had accumulated was used not to hold the world at bay, but to tear itself to pieces. The trade-off was absolute. Ethiopia traded its potential future for a brief, brilliant, but unsustainable present. It traded unity for power, tradition for technology, and ultimately its own soul for a crown of iron and rust. The world it left behind is a testament to this tragic bargain. A fractured land of silence and zealotry, a cautionary tale whispered in the chanceries of the world. Was the brief moment of glory worth the silent ruin that followed?